Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere cold. London, 18-something. The kind of winter that turns breath into fog and cobblestones into glass. The lamps burn weakly under soot, and even the air feels second-hand from the factories still wheezing through the night. You duck your head against the drizzle and realise it's December 24th. But no one seems to care. You won't believe this. People back then didn't even stop for Christmas. To them, it was just another payday waiting to happen, or another shift to survive. The streets hum with wheels and hooves, and the clatter from the foundries keeps going long after dark. Alright, before you get too cosy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, but only if your heart says yes. Now tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there. Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. You turn a corner near the Thames, following the smell of coal and damp rope. Above you, gaslight flickers on the wet iron posts, each one hissing softly like it's tired of the cold too. Across the water, warehouse windows glow with furnaces still alive inside. Dock workers in heavy coats shuffle home, shoulders bent, their boots leaving wet imprints that vanish in the fog. Nobody hums a tune. No ribbons, no wreaths, just grey on grey. London this decade is bursting at its seams. 6 million people breathing the same smoke, chasing the same hunger. The factories never sleep. The city can't afford to. Even the newspaper boys, half the size of their stacks, shout headlines through frozen lips. The only colour comes from shopfront posters peeling in the rain. Cheap gin, patent soap, miracle tonics promising warmth in a bottle. You pause near a bakery window. A single pudding sits inside, dusted with sugar like snow on a mountain top. A little girl presses her face to the glass, her hands leaving clear prints on the foggy pane. The baker scowls and draws the curtain. She scurries off. Somewhere a clock strikes 6, and another day slides by unnoticed. Down an alley you catch a different scent. Oranges, rare and sharp, rolling from a crate. A man gathers them quickly, too valuable to waste. The fruit came from the Mediterranean by steamship, and only those with coin can afford the luxury of colour in winter. Most Londoners make do with boiled turnips and wishful thinking. A horse whinnies nearby. Its driver curses, tugging at the reins as he guides a cart stacked with coal sacks toward a mansion farther west. The city runs on 2 fuels, coal and class. Both burn hot, both leave soot behind. You cross into a quieter lane where lamplighters move methodically, poles raised to spark each glass globe to life. They look like ghosts wading through yellow mist, lighting the city's veins one by one. It's oddly peaceful, this mechanical glow pulsing along the streets, even if no one calls it festive. Somewhere, in the distance, a whistle shrieks from a factory roof, shift change. Doors burst open and workers flood out, coughing into their sleeves. Their laughter is brief, raspy, almost defiant. A few trade jokes about the holiday they won't get, though one man says he's heard rumours. The Queen herself has decorated a tree inside Buckingham Palace. Most shrug. Royals live in another universe, yet you feel it. A faint stirring under all this grime, like embers hidden in ash. Something wants to change. But tonight, London stays indifferent. The fog thickens, swallowing the glow, and your breath joins the city's sigh. You keep walking, boots crunching on the frosted stones, the smell of horse dung and chimney soot thick enough to taste. Somewhere behind you, a bar door swings open. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the thin tune of a fiddle spill out before the cold slams it shut again. It's not exactly cheer, more like people trying to forget the ache in their hands. Londoners don't celebrate the season, they simply endure it. Past the tavern, an older man sells roasted chestnuts from a tin drum balanced on bricks. The coals hiss and pop, throwing faint sparks that look almost magical in the smog. You buy a handful, burnt, smoky, too hot to hold, but the warmth seeps through your gloves. No church bells tonight, he says without looking up. Too dear to ring for a city that don't listen. You nod. He's not wrong. On the next corner, an omnibus rattles by, its wheels spitting slush. The painted slogans promise a merrier London, but the passengers look anything but merry. Clerks with ink-stained fingers, maids in borrowed coats, soldiers on leave already half drunk. Everyone stares ahead as if looking at tomorrow might be easier than looking at now. In the window of a pawn shop hangs a row of brass candlesticks and cracked violins. Beside them, a stack of handbills advertises seasonal goods. But the season means something different here. Overtime shifts, freezing rooms, and maybe an extra loaf of bread if your employer's feeling kind. For most of the city, Christmas isn't about faith or festivity. It's the line between surviving and slipping under. A woman sweeps her stoop, her breath clouding as she works. You ask why she bothers this late. Keeps the landlord from fining me, she mutters, scraping frost from the railing. The irony stings, everyone polishing the misery just enough to keep it respectable. Still, scattered signs of change blink through the fog. Near Covent Garden, a newspaper boy waves a fresh sheet under the gaslight. Headlines about the royal family's tree, imported from Germany, candles blazing on its branches. Some passers-by scoff, others grin faintly. For the first time, the word Christmas looks less like a forgotten relic and more like an experiment in joy. You turn toward the river again. The water moves sluggishly, carrying bits of ice between barges. Across the bank, you see one grand townhouse faintly glowing behind lace curtains. Inside, silhouettes of servants pass trays, and the clink of glass drifts out into the dark. Somewhere, someone is feasting. You wonder if the Queen's tree is glowing at that very moment, its wax dripping like honey over green needles, its ornaments glittering with the kind of light ordinary people never touch. A carriage passes, wheels throwing dirty snow against your boots. The horse's breath steams in the gaslight, and for a moment you imagine it's smoke from a hearth, one you might share if you belong to another world. But the carriage vanishes, and the cold reclaims you. You step into a narrow alley to shield yourself from the wind. A boy sleeps curled up beside a wall, wrapped in a tattered coat 2 sizes too big. His cheeks are red from frostbite, but on his face, something peaceful. Maybe he's dreaming of that palace tree, of candlelight and sugared oranges he's never tasted. Maybe he's dreaming of warmth that's not borrowed from strangers' pity. You pull your coat tighter and move on. Somewhere deep inside you know this city is about to change. It doesn't know it yet. How a story, a queen, and an idea will soon remake the very meaning of winter. For now, London remains silent beneath its own smoke, the faint hiss of gaslight the only pulse in its veins. And in that silence, the forgotten Christmas of the Victorian age waits, still buried under soot, but beginning, just barely, to breathe. Morning creeps in pale and half-hearted, the kind of light that doesn't so much rise as struggle through the smoke. The city looks rinsed in pewter. You wake to the rattle of milk carts and the raucous calls of street vendors already at work. For most Londoners, December 25th is just another workday, a day to balance ledgers, sweep chimneys, and feed the furnace. You step into the street and find the same grey tide moving through the fog. Boys in threadbare coats race past carrying bundles of newspapers, women carry baskets of washing on their hips, and blackened factory gates gape like the mouths of iron beasts waiting to swallow them whole. Even the Thames smells of industry, its tide dragging bits of ash and sawdust toward the sea. At a nearby factory you see a line of men and women stamping their feet for warmth, waiting for the overseer to open the door. Inside, the air will be thick with steam and oil, but at least it's warmer than outside. One man mutters that he asked for the day off to be with his family. His pay was docked for the idea. The rest nod without sympathy. Time off is a luxury few can imagine. Down the lane, a young boy balances a tray of meat pies on his head, shouting to attract customers. The pies are more crust than filling, but they vanish fast. Hunger makes everything taste of hope. A ragged woman buys one for a halfpenny, splitting it in two to share with a toddler at her skirt. The steam curls up and disappears into the grey air as if ashamed of how brief it is. Even in the markets, the mood is the same: brisk, practical, unsentimental. Butchers hang their cuts in the cold. Bakers stack loaves like bricks. A few stalls sell greenery, holly, ivy and mistletoe, but mostly to rich houses in the West End. Here in the East, you'd get strange looks for wasting money on decoration. What good is a garland when the rent collector's due? You wander through Smithfield Market where the smell of blood, hay and frost mixes into something metallic. Cattle low behind fences and drovers shout prices over the din. One man jokes, "They say the Queen's got a tree. Maybe we'll get one when pigs fly." The laughter is dry, but it carries. Somewhere beyond the market a steam whistle shrills, another factory beginning its day. It's hard to imagine that this city will one day invent the Christmas card, the Christmas tree, the very idea of the holiday spirit. For now, London's pulse beats to profit, not peace. You pass a boarding house where a notice is pinned to the door. Dinner serves 7 p.m. Beef stew and bread, 1 penny. The smell seeps through the cracks, heavy with onions and bone. Inside, a dozen men huddle over tin bowls. One hums a tune under his breath, an old folk melody about winter and love lost. The others listen quietly, spoons paused. The song dies before it finds an ending. Outside again, you watch a small procession wind its way down the street. 3 costermongers, dragging a cart decorated with ribbons. On it sits a worn-out barrel organ, cranking out a shaky version of a dance tune. They move from corner to corner, hoping for coins, laughter chasing the cold away for a moment. One man grins and says, "If London won't give us a Christmas, we'll make one ourselves." It's the first hint you've seen that something human still stirs beneath all the soot. Even in a city that's forgotten how to pause, the instinct to find light in the dark refuses to die. You follow the echo of the barrel organ until the tune fades behind the roar of the foundries, wondering if next winter will sound the same, or if something, or someone, will finally teach London to stop. The afternoon settles like dust. Clouds hang so low they seem to press against the rooftops, and the fog turns the city into a smudged charcoal drawing. You wander toward the poorer quarters near Clerkenwell, where narrow alleys squeeze between leaning buildings. Laundry stiffens on the lines, frozen into shapes of shirts and stockings that rattle like paper when the wind slides through. Here, every doorway tells a story. One woman crouches on her step, darning socks with trembling fingers. Behind her, 2 children argue over who gets the warm side of the brick pulled from the fireplace. Down the lane, an old man sharpens knives, the metal shriek echoing like a violin badly played. The city feels alive, but it's the kind of life that survives out of habit rather than joy. You stop near a public house, the Horse and Cart, where the sound of laughter leaks out in bursts. Inside, it's warm, smoky and loud. Coal smoke mixes with the sharp scent of gin. Men crowd around tables, not to toast the season, but to toast escape. "To another year!" someone shouts, and the room roars back. One man insists that December used to mean something once, something about family, about firesides, but no one bothers to remember what. They're too busy swallowing the bitterness. In the corner, a young woman with ink-stained sleeves counts coins on a ledger. She works for a textile mill and has been told to come in tomorrow, holiday or not. When you ask if she minds, she smirks. Mind? I'd rather work. Work's warmer than home. She pockets the coins and leaves without finishing her drink. Outside, dusk returns before the day can properly end. Gas lamps bloom along the street, small golden orbs fighting the gloom. You notice how their light doesn't reach the rooftops. It hovers just high enough to remind everyone how dark the rest of the city remains. A thin drizzle begins, tapping on the cobbles, blurring reflections of the lamps until the ground itself looks molten. A carriage splashes past, its wheels flinging muddy water onto your coat. Inside, you glimpse the velvet sleeve of someone important. Through the fogged window, the passenger raises a glass, and for a moment you see the shimmer of candlelight inside. A private feast already, underway. You can almost smell roast goose and hear crystal touching crystal. Then the carriage disappears into the mist and the smell of smoke and sewage returns. By the bridge, a group of street children cluster around a brazier made from a broken barrel. One boy pokes the coals and hums something low and tuneless. Another claps his hands to the rhythm. They're making their own music out of the scraps of warmth they have. You stand with them a while, watching their shadows dance against the wall. For a heartbeat, it almost feels like celebration. The wind picks up, carrying snippets of conversation and the sound of river water slapping stone. You hear talk of change, rumours of new factories, of pay rises, of a certain writer scribbling about ghosts and generosity. But for now, London stays restless, stubborn, and tired. As night deepens, the city exhales a collective sigh. The gaslights flicker, the markets close, the factory horns fall silent one by one. For the first time all day, you can hear your own footsteps again. It's not peace, exactly. Just an intermission before the grind resumes. Yet in that pause, something lingers. The faint warmth of the children's brazier, the murmur of that off-key song, the fleeting image of a tree in a palace somewhere far away. Maybe the city hasn't forgotten Christmas entirely. Maybe it's only waiting for someone to remind it what warmth feels like. The next evening, the fog thickens to the colour of dirty milk, and you walk through it as though wading through old dreams. Somewhere up ahead, the bells of St. Paul's toll faintly, half drowned by the hiss of steam and the grind of wheels. You can't see the cathedral's dome, just its ghostly outline vanishing into the grey. London feels ancient tonight, haunted by the memory of winters long gone. You turn down a quieter street, its cobbles slick with rain. The smell of tallow candles and damp stone mixes in the air. An old bookseller waves you in from his doorway, beckoning toward a crate of prints and pamphlets. "Old Christmas tales," he says with a crooked grin, "back when the English knew how to make a racket." You thumb through brittle pages, carols, feast lists, crude woodcuts of dancing peasants. They look like they belong to another species. The bookseller chuckles. "You won't find much of that these days. We used to deck every hall, roast boars, drink till the walls sang. Then came the Puritans, stamped it all out, every bit of it." His eyes gleam in the lamplight. "Said it was wasteful, sinful, bad for the soul. Now look at us, a country allergic to fun." You thank him and step back into the drizzle. His words hang in the fog. Century ago, those Puritan laws truly did shut down Christmas, banned the feasts, outlawed the gatherings, even forbade playing games. Soldiers once patrolled the streets to stop people from celebrating. You picture it. Doors barred, taverns shuttered, the smell of roast goose replaced by ink and order. Tradition smothered under the pretense of discipline. The result lingers even now. London's caution toward joy feels inherited, as though the city still fears it will be punished for being merry. Generations grew up treating December as just another line in the calendar. The laughter died, but the restraint survived. You follow the winding streets towards Southwark, where old timber houses lean toward each other like conspirators. Somewhere behind closed shutters, faint music leaks into the fog, a violin scraping out a tune that sounds older than the city itself. It might once have been a dance, but now it's too slow for that, more like a memory trying to stay alive. A group of dock workers emerge from a tavern, arguing about politics and pay. One of them, red-faced and loud, says his grandfather told him stories of the old 12 days, a dozen nights of revelry and mischief stretching into January. They'd crown a fool king, toss snow in the streets, and drink like tomorrow didn't exist. His friends laugh, but none of them can imagine such a thing. The world they know runs on wages, not whimsy. You cross a small bridge slick with frost, the Thames below black as tar. Barges creak against the pilings. Over the water, faint lights shimmer from the opposite bank where warehouses sleep under soot. The city looks vast and ancient and yet fragile, like one good laugh could wake it from a spell. Somewhere behind you, the bookseller's bell rings again, his voice fading through the fog. Don't forget what they took, lad. Maybe he's right. Maybe the forgotten Christmas of the Victorian age isn't just an absence. It's a wound from an older time, still healing beneath layers of smoke and manners. You stop at the edge of the river, watching your breath mingle with the mist. You can almost feel the ghosts of those lost festivals, the roaring fires, the wild dances, the reckless joy of a people who didn't yet measure life by the clock. It feels distant, but not gone, like a tune you can't quite remember but still hum anyway. You linger by the river, the cold gnawing through your coat, when a night watchman strolls past swinging his lantern. He hums a tune so old it sounds almost pagan, something about ivy and ale. When you ask what it is, he shrugs. Old winter song, my day used to sing it. They say it's lucky. His breath fogs as he disappears into the murk. You're left with the echo of the melody, faint, defiant, and strangely comforting. It's odd to think that for hundreds of years the English year turned around feasts and festivals. The end of the harvest meant ale, firelight, and feasting that spilled from manor halls to muddy fields. The rich toasted abundance. The poor were invited in to share scraps and stories. For 12 days the rules of class softened. Then the reforms came, industrial, moral and social, and everything grew sharper, faster, cleaner. Fun was replaced by efficiency. By the early 19th century, any excuse for wild festivity felt outdated, even embarrassing. The new urban middle class preferred respectability to revelry. The factories demanded regular hours. The landlords demanded rent on time. Merrymaking looked suspicious, lazy, even dangerous. London learned to equate silence with virtue and joy with waste. You pass a printing shop where broadsheets are being inked for the morning. A headline catches your eye. Temperance League condemns winter drinking. The paper smells of fresh coal smoke and indignation. The typesetter wipes his hands and mutters, "Can't laugh, can't drink, can't sing, they'll take the weather next." He grins, but there's bitterness in it. Further along, you spot a tavern sign hanging crookedly above the door, a painted sprig of holly, faded and cracked. The publican is nailing it back into place. You ask why he bothers. "It's tradition," he says simply, hammering the final nail. Then he wipes his hands and adds, "Someone's got to remember." Inside, the tavern smells of wood smoke, wet wool, and faint rebellion. A few regulars sit by the hearth, swapping stories of the old days. One man swears his grandmother spoke of villages where people dressed as animals and danced through the snow, banging pots to chase away winter spirits. Another recalls bonfires in the square where they'd throw dried herbs to bless the fields. The tales sound half myth, half memory, but their eyes gleam as they tell them. For a moment, the room feels warmer. You realise these aren't just stories. They're fossils of a culture that used to celebrate survival itself. Winter was the enemy, and every fire, feast or song was an act of defiance. That instinct, though buried under soot and self-restraint, still pulses faintly through the city. Outside again, the rain eases to a mist. Chimneys puff steadily, turning the skyline into a low forest of smoke. Somewhere behind the clouds, the moon tries to shine through. You pass a group of lamplighters finishing their rounds. One pauses, balancing his pole, and says, "They say the Queen's husbands brought over a new kind of tree from Germany, candles and all. Strange folk, them royals." He chuckles, unaware that this small detail will soon ignite an empire's imagination. As you walk away, the air carries traces of that forgotten joy, the kind that survives bans, plagues and poverty. It hides in the corners of taverns, in the tunes hummed by tired men, in the holly nailed to a door simply because someone remembers. The Puritans may have stripped the flesh from Christmas, but the bones still stand, waiting for warmth to return. And somewhere in the distance, through fog and furnace glow, you sense it coming, the faintest spark of change that will soon turn this grey city golden, at least for a few fleeting days each year. The next morning dawns with a sky the colour of tin, the kind that promises nothing except cold. You wake in a boarding room off Fleet Street where the window panes are so frosted they look painted. Below, a horse cart rattles by, iron rims clanging against the cobbles. The driver shouts, "Coal for sale!" His voice echoes between the narrow walls before fading into the endless hum of London. You wrap your scarf tight and step out, heading east where the city grows meaner. The fog tastes of soot. Each breath feels borrowed. The streets grow tighter, the smells sharper. Tallow, sewage, old bread and smoke. This is where the forgotten Christmas truly lives, not in palaces or papers, but in rooms smaller than cupboards and colder than graves. Through a cracked doorway, you glimpse a woman ladling something from a pot. Her hands tremble as she pours it into chipped bowls. Two children sit cross-legged on the floor, each waiting their turn with the same fixed politeness that only hunger teaches. You lean closer. The pot holds more water than food. Thin stew with a few slices of carrot floating like treasure. The mother looks up, her face hollowed by the winter. "It's hot," she says softly, as though temperature alone might feed them. There's no tree, no tinsel, no laughter, just survival. You can almost hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the wall, searching for warmth to steal. Out on the main street, the city doesn't notice. Carriages splash through puddles, wheels coated in black ice. Butchers haul carcasses on hooks, calling prices as if to an audience that isn't listening. Even the beggars look too tired to plead. You pass a boy with a basket of apples so bruised they look like stones. Still, he guards them like gold. At a corner shop, a man sells candles by the dozen. The cheapest are made of animal fat and smell faintly rancid when lit. Better than darkness, he tells you, rubbing his hands for warmth. You buy one, if only to feel the wax's faint heat against your palm. When he hands you change, his fingers are blue. Further along, a factory chimney leans against the sky, coughing black smoke over the rooftops. A group of women file out for a break, faces pale beneath soot. They crowd around a brazier, laughing softly. One pulls from her pocket a scrap of cloth embroidered with red thread, 2 crooked initials and a heart. "Made it from leftovers," she says, "for my sister's bairn." The others murmur approval. in a place where everything is rationed. Even affection must be stitched from scraps. A brass band of soldiers marches past, their boots synchronized and clean. Children stop to watch, their eyes wide, their hands still wrapped around half-eaten crusts. For a moment, the grey world feels theatrical, like the city is pretending to be alive. Then the band turns a corner, and the music fades back into the factory drone. You cross into a courtyard where laundry lines hang heavy with rags. Someone's pinned up a small green branch, a sprig of holly, maybe stolen from a wealthier district's hedge. It flutters in the breeze like a flag of defiance. You imagine it's her way of saying, "We may be cold, but we're still here." The night before, you'd felt London's history weighing it down. Now you feel its humanity fighting back. Even when the cupboards are empty, people find a way to craft meaning out of nothing, to share broth, to gift a bit of colour, to hang a single green leaf against the grey. It isn't much, but it's something the city's rules can't take away. And for the first time, as snow begins to fall, soft, hesitant, like it's forgotten how, you realise that maybe this is where the rebirth of Christmas begins. Not in marble halls, but in rooms like this, where warmth is an act of rebellion. You keep walking, the snow now gathering along windowsills and curling into the corners of doorways. It softens the sounds of the city, muffles the clang of carts and the shouts of traders. For a moment, even London seems unsure of itself, like it's caught between the urgency of industry and the hush of something older, slower. In an alley behind a print shop, you see a small figure crouched beside a grate where steam leaks from the floor. It's a boy, maybe 7 or 8, with no gloves and shoes so thin they may as well be paper. He's holding a tin spoon in one hand and a lump of stale bread in the other. He doesn't eat yet. He just sits watching the steam, letting the warmth kiss his cheeks. When he notices you, he grins. "Warmest spot in the city," he says. "Don't tell the others." You ask where he'll sleep tonight. "Same place as always," he shrugs, nodding toward a stairwell under the bakery. "If the rats get there first, I give them a crust and they let me be." His voice isn't bitter, it's matter of fact, like he's learned to negotiate with the world just to exist. Not far from him, a woman pushes a pram with no baby in it, only kindling, a blanket, and a chipped teapot. She hums to herself as she walks. When the wheels catch on a stone, she stops, adjusts the teapot like it's an infant, then continues. This is how the city survives, through quiet invention, stubborn dignity, and the small kindnesses that no ledger records. You pass a shop with a display that tries to mimic festivity. There's a wreath in the window made of paper and dyed cloth, and behind it a sign reads, "Holiday Specials, Soap, Candles, Cabbage." 3 men stand outside arguing over whether it's worth spending their last shillings on a trimmed roast or coal. One votes roast. "You can eat warmth," he says. Another says coal. "Warmth keeps the bones from cracking." The third just laughs and buys a single candle, muttering, "Looks like Christmas, smells like tallow." At a street corner near Clerkenwell Green, a group of children have found an old barrel. Someone stuffed newspaper and straw into it and lit it with a match. They gather round it, cheeks glowing, eyes wide, passing between them the end of a broken harmonica. One girl blows a wobbly note and the others laugh. It's not music, but it's theirs. Suddenly, one of the boys pulls a string of something from his coat. It's a chain of buttons tied together with twine. "Christmas lights," he announces proudly, stringing them between 2 posts. The others clap and cheer like it's the greatest invention they've ever seen. You can't help but smile. In this alley of rags and frostbite, a carnival is formed out of junk. You stay a while, sharing the warmth, watching the buttons sway in the breeze. The children dance around the barrel like they've just invented celebration from scratch. And maybe they have. They haven't read about royal trees or German ornaments. They've never tasted plum pudding or seen a wax candle on a fir. But here they are, creating a moment that feels like joy, honest, scrappy and defiant. As you leave, one of the girls shouts after you, "Don't forget us in your story!" She grins, her face smudged with soot, her voice ringing brighter than any bell. And you won't. Because this, more than any banquet or ball, is the part of Christmas the history books tend to skip. The part that lives in alleys, in soot-covered laughter, in spoon-warmed hands, in a button garland strung against the dark. This isn't the Christmas that's lost. It's the one no one thought to record. Snow still clings to the city like ash on a dying fire. You head west now, toward the neighbourhoods where the bricks are cleaner, the lamps taller, and the windows glimmer with something approaching elegance. The change is slow but undeniable. Door knockers are polished. Footsteps are softer here, muffled by thick soled boots and carriage rugs. Even the cold feels gentler, as though privilege has the power to dull the wind. As you round a bend in Belgravia, a soft golden light glows from behind lace curtains. You pause beside a tall iron fence, peering through frost-framed glass into a drawing room that could be a stage set. Inside, a roaring fireplace, polished mahogany, a servant carrying a tray of sugared fruit. And in the centre, yes, there it is, a tree. A real fir standing proud and candlelit, its branches weighted with ribbons, oranges, silver chains and gleaming glass baubles. It looks new, almost uncertain, like the tree isn't quite sure why it's here, because it is new, at least in England. Word has travelled fast that Queen Victoria and Prince Albert have imported the tradition from Albert's German childhood, decorating a tree in Windsor Castle with candles and handmade ornaments. The illustrated magazines have run engravings of it. Society has taken note, and just like that, a new symbol is born. You watch as two children circle the tree, pointing and gasping at each bauble like it's treasure. They're dressed in velvet and lace, cheeks flushed not from cold but from too much excitement. Their father looks on from an armchair, mildly amused, brandy glass in hand. Their mother adjusts the ribbon on a branch, lips pursed in concentration. It's all terribly rehearsed, but not unkind. Outside, the snow catches in your collar. You try to imagine explaining this to the girl with the stew pot, or the boy curled beside the steam grate. A tree, indoors, covered in fire and sugar and silver. It would sound like a dream, or a trick. And yet, here it is, flickering into reality behind glass. You move on, passing house after house, and find that several have copied the idea. Some more modestly, a sprig of holly on the door, or a garland of dried orange slices in the window. Others go all out, hired decorators, gaslit angels, strings of cranberries like red punctuation. For the wealthier classes, a fashion has taken hold, and with fashion comes imitation. At a small publishing house just off Pall Mall, you find the latest issue of the Illustrated London News. The cover is a woodcut of the royal family gathered around their own tree, each child holding a tiny gift. The caption reads, "A German custom adored by the Queen, now warming English hearts." The article inside speaks of sentiment, of hearth and home, of sweet traditions rising like bread in an English oven. But you know better. The oven burns coal. The gifts are stitched in factory rows. The sentiment is real, yes, but it rides on the back of steam, steel, and skilled marketing. Still, you can't deny the power of the image. It tugs at you. It tugs at everyone. You overhear a lamplighter say that his wife wants a tree now, even if it's just a broomstick with apples tied on. "She says it'll cheer the children," he shrugs. Can't argue with that. The other lamplighters laugh, but there's warmth in it. The idea is spreading, not because the Queen decrees it, but because it offers something London has lacked for so long, a reason to pause, a symbol of light indoors in the dark heart of winter. That night, back near the East End, you find yourself walking past a row of houses where the bricks are cracked, the chimneys chipped, and the windows patched with oilcloth. But in one of them, just one, a flicker of something unfamiliar catches your eye. You stop, lean in. It's a tree. Or rather, it's what someone's decided is a tree. A crooked branch jammed into a tin bucket weighed down with stones. It's been wrapped in red yarn, likely salvaged from an old sweater, and dotted with paper ornaments cut from flour sacks and newspapers. A lump of tallow candle burns at the base, flickering wildly but holding steady. 3 children sit on the floor around it, hands outstretched toward the heat, not to warm themselves, but to warm the idea. Their mother hums as she stitches a doll's dress by the fire, and their father carves something small and clumsy from a block of wood. It's quiet, but the kind of quiet that holds something sacred, not religious, just gentle. Like the whole room has decided to believe in the possibility of peace. You knock softly. The mother answers, surprised but smiling. You ask about the branch. She blushes. Saw it in a picture. Thought I'd try. She nods toward the children. Didn't think it mattered. Turns out it does. You thank her and step back into the snow, the glow from their window warming your coat for a few steps longer than it should. The Queen's fir has become a poor man's branch, but it means something now. It's growing its own roots, right here in the soot and the slush. Elsewhere in the city, shopkeepers have caught on. In the arcade windows near Regent Street, you spot whole displays now built around trees, one even featuring a mechanical Santa in a sleigh, his beard made of cotton, his boots painted gold. It's absurd and delightful and oddly eerie. Children press their noses to the glass. Parents check their coin purses. Everyone wants in. A man selling oranges complains, they're selling pine cones like they're rubies now. Soon they'll charge to breathe the air. He laughs bitterly, but he's not entirely wrong. The season of imitation has begun, and with it, a quiet commerce in joy. You pass a florist hawking sprigs of mistletoe, his sign reading for luck in the new year. A clever marketing trick, but the line outside his stall is real. People will pay for hope, even if it smells like damp leaves, and costs a penny they shouldn't spend. At a pub on the corner, a group of chimney sweeps have pooled their wages to buy a roast bird. It's not goose, it's something leaner and less noble, but they cheer anyway. One of them lifts a glass and proclaims, "To the Queen's tree, and to whatever this holiday's becoming." That's the thing about London. Once it adopts a ritual, it chews it up, swallows it, and remakes it in its own image. The palace may have started the trend, but it's the tenements, the alleyways, and the broomstick trees where it begins to matter. By the time you reach your lodging, the snow has covered the footprints of the day. The gaslights burn soft, golden puddles against the white. Somewhere behind you, a child laughs. Somewhere ahead, a shopkeeper locks his door and hums the first 2 notes of a carol he doesn't quite remember. And in that space between palace and pauper, tree and branch, something real begins to take root. The kind of Christmas that doesn't need a crown to shine. It's evening now, and the streets have started to hum with a different energy. Not joy, not quite, but movement. A quiet stirring beneath the usual clamour of hoofbeats and factory bells. You follow the sound of something both mechanical and musical, and before long you find yourself in the shadow of a newspaper office just off Fleet Street, where a crowd has gathered beside a hulking, clattering steam press. Inside, the machine is breathing, steam pumping, gears spinning, sheets of paper spitting out with a rhythm almost hypnotic. A printer in inky sleeves waves one high above his head. "First issue of the week," he calls. "Holiday edition." The crowd shuffles forward, curious. You take one. The front page bears something you wouldn't have expected 10 years ago. A column of cheerful stories, seasonal poetry, and, of all things, a recipe for plum pudding. But what really catches your eye is the bottom corner. A simple black and white rectangle framed in holly. It's a Christmas card, or at least an early attempt at one, printed right into the newspaper. Cut this out and send it to a friend. The words are wrapped around a picture of a family raising glasses. The caption reads, "A happy Christmas to you and yours." It's peculiar. The image is stiff, the face is oddly grim for such a greeting, but the intention is there, and that's what matters. You turn the paper over and realise something else. The card was sponsored. Tiny letters below the image read, "With compliments of Whitwell's fine soap." You blink. So this is how the holiday spreads, not just by royal example or whispered song, but by ink and commerce, typeface and timing. Nearby, two boys in capes too big for their shoulders run down the street clutching stacks of printed cards. "A halfpenny each," they shout. "Merry Christmas from your grocer, your landlord, your coal man." You see them slip one under a door, then another through a letter slot. Each one says the same thing. "Wishing you cheer this season." It's like someone is papering the city with optimism. Forced, maybe, but earnest. You follow the boys for a while and soon others join them. A girl with red ribbon in her hair sells handmade cards at a corner stand. They're painted with snow-covered cottages, geese, a few oddly unsettling clowns, and one card with a frog riding a bicycle that makes absolutely no sense. But they sell. Fast. Inside a tea shop, a young woman writes a dozen cards with ink-stained fingers. She addresses each one carefully, brows furrowed in concentration. You catch the names. Co-workers, neighbours, her landlord, the woman from the butcher's. It's not family she's sending cheer to, it's proximity. The people who see her, day in and day out. In a city where no one has time, a card becomes the currency of presents. You ask if she's always done this. She smiles. "First year. Got the idea from a shopkeeper who sent one to me. Thought, well, if he can think of me, I can think of them." She licks the envelope and seals it like it's something sacred. As you leave the tea shop, you pass a boy holding up a card to the lamplight, squinting. "What does Yuletide mean?" he asks no one in particular. A man nearby shrugs. "Means you're supposed to be nicer than usual." The boy snorts and tucks it in his coat. "Reckon that's all right." And there it is again, that subtle shift. Not in law, not in sermon, but in gesture. In something small enough to fit through a door. You cross over to Cheapside, where the smell of ink fades into roasting chestnuts and wet wool. Here the shop fronts have begun competing, not with price, but with sentiment. Ribbons hang like banners across bakery windows. Butchers place holly above their door frames. One fishmonger set out a bowl of oranges with a sign that reads, "Take one if you've got none." You don't know if it's charity or marketing, maybe both, but no one questions it. You duck into a tiny stationer's wedged between a pawn shop and a barber. Inside, the air is warm with glue and candle wax. Behind the counter, a woman in wire spectacles assembles stacks of thick cream-coloured cards. She's stamping them one by one, her hands precise. You ask her if business is better than usual. "Booming," she replies, not looking up. "Didn't sell one of these last winter. Now folks can't get enough. Even had a man ask if we could print cards with his own face on them. Imagine that." She pauses. "Maybe next year." Next to her sits a boy. Her son, maybe, drawing crooked holly leaves on a card with coloured chalk. The caption says in careful letters, a quiet hearth, and warm boots to you. It's not elegant, but it feels more honest than the professionally etched families with their frosty smiles. On your way out, a gust of wind catches the door and carries a handful of unsold cards into the street. A group of chimney sweeps chase after them, laughing, their soot-streaked hands grabbing at fluttering wishes. One of them reads his aloud, mock-theatrical, "To my dearest friend, may the season find you well fed and well remembered." The others cheer, and he bows. This, you realise, is how culture happens, not through laws or edicts, but repetition and small delight. Someone receives a card and feels, oddly, acknowledged, seen. So they send one in return, and the gesture becomes ritual. You pass a boarding house door cracked open just enough to see a hallway strung with twine. Along it cards hang like laundry, dozens of them bent and mismatched, some smeared with ink, others clearly reused from the year before. They flap gently with the draft. There's no symmetry, no curation, just a community of names. A man steps outside, his hat lopsided, and nods toward them. "Better than wallpaper," he says. "At least these were meant for someone." Then he lights a pipe and disappears into the mist. Later, as you make your way back along the river, you spot a boatman pinning a card to the wall of his boathouse. It's already warped from the fog, curling at the edges. The picture on the front is of a single lantern glowing through snow. No words, but he's placed it just above the door, at eye level, like a blessing. And this is how it grows, this paper-thin tradition. Not with choirs and fanfare, but with ink, envelopes, and strangers daring to wish one another well. The first Christmas cards weren't grand. Some were downright strange, like the ones that showed dead robins, beetles dancing in boots, or children stuffed in pudding bowls. But the oddness didn't stop them. If anything, it made them real. Because they weren't selling a fantasy. They were offering connection. Even now, as the fog rolls back in and the city returns to its iron routine, you can still hear the rustle of paper behind doors, wishes fluttering from hand to hand, 1,000 tiny declarations that, if only for a moment, someone thought of someone else. The streets are louder now, not because of joy exactly, but because of novelty. You step into a neighbourhood where the air smells of cinnamon, gunpowder and baked sugar. Inside a corner shop, a man cranks a tin music box that tinkles out a merry tune, while customers crowd around a new invention stacked high behind him. Christmas crackers. They're gaudy, fragile-looking things, wrapped in coloured paper and tied at both ends like candies for giants. "They explode, I tell you," the shopkeeper says proudly, wrapping one on the counter. "Inside, little toys, jokes, paper hats, all in a pop. Queen's got 'em at court, and now you can too." You watch a boy eye them nervously, his copper coins clutched in a sweaty fist. He buys one, just one, then bolts outside to open it. Snap! It bangs with a sound like a gunshot and sends a tin whistle flying into the slush. He whoops like it's magic. It kind of is. Further down the road, in a bakery glowing with firelight and sugar dust, a cook hefts a tray of round, glistening puddings onto the counter. Each one is dark and heavy with raisins, smelling of nutmeg and molasses. A customer asks if they're traditional, and the baker scoffs. Nothing traditional about them. My mother never made one, but people read about them in Dickens and now they all want one for the table. You ask if it bothers him. "Bothers me?" he laughs. "Bothers me that I didn't start earlier." He slaps a paper label on one pudding. "As seen in A Christmas Carol," then winks. "You want yours with extra sentiment?" Outside, you catch sight of a tin toy cart being wheeled through the crowd. It's painted red and gold with the words "Penny Delights for the Season." The toys inside are small, wooden horses, spinning tops, dolls with cloth faces, but they glitter in the light like treasure. Children press their noses to the glass. bargaining with parents or strangers, anyone with spare coin. One small boy trades a pair of wool socks for a wind-up bird that flaps in wobbly circles before falling over. He doesn't care, it's his, and that's all that matters. You round a corner and walk straight into a street performance. A man in a patchy coat juggles oranges, while another bangs a tambourine and shouts rhymed insults at the crowd. They're not carolers, they're hustlers with flair. But around them people laugh, toss coins and, for a few seconds, forget they're cold and poor. Everywhere you look, the season is beginning to mass-produce delight. Not just decorations and pudding moulds, but feelings, crystallized into objects, streamlined for purchase. Childhood, now available at any market stall. One cracker, one joke, one paper crown at a time. You slip into a shop lit by a whale oil chandelier. Inside, shelves creak beneath boxes labelled noisemakers and toys for all good boys. There are tin drums, pop guns, puzzles, and even something labelled mechanical dancing monkey. Imported. You wind it up. It twitches, shudders, and collapses face first onto the floor. The shopkeeper doesn't flinch. That's normal, he says. The kids love it anyway. And here's the oddest part. They really do. The quality doesn't matter. The polish doesn't matter. It's the ritual of receiving something, of laughter wrapped in paper, of joy becoming a thing, a cracker, a toy, a pudding, so it can be passed from hand to hand. It may be noisy, it may be cheap, but it's changing everything. And once it starts, there's no stopping it. The streets thrum with the sound of tiny explosions. Not danger, delight. Crackers are popping everywhere now. Two boys chase each other around a lamppost, each yanking one end of a red and gold tube until it bursts with a snap and scatters glitter, ribbon, and a bent paper crown. One boy sticks the crown on his head with great seriousness. "I'm the pudding king," he declares, and no one argues. At a dinner table behind a fogged-up window, you see an entire family in identical hats, pink, yellow, green, eating sausages and mashed potatoes beneath flickering candlelight. It's not grand, but it feels like a celebration. You imagine they just pulled crackers, told silly jokes and laughed because the jokes were awful. And that was the point. This isn't tradition passed down from elders or etched in stone. This is invention, and it's spreading like spilled flour. You pass a street vendor hawking boxes labelled holiday essentials. Each contains one cracker, a plastic whistle, a joke printed on thin blue paper, and a single square of fruit jelly wrapped in wax. "Joy in a box," he shouts, "guaranteed or your penny back." The joke when you peek inside reads, "What do you get when you cross a snowman and a vampire?" You flip it over. Frostbite. It's terrible. You laugh anyway. Nearby, two factory girls stand outside a cloth shop admiring a tiny display. A doll dressed as Queen Victoria holding a cracker like a sceptre. One girl whispers, "Reckon we'll ever have a Christmas like hers?" Her friend snorts. "What, with 4 kinds of pudding and a husband that reads poetry? Unlikely." But then she pauses. "Still, I've got a hat, and Mam's got matches to light the cake." There's magic in that sentence, in the way 2 working-class girls claim Christmas as their own. Not because they're told to, but because they can. You duck into a back alley and find a group of boys crouched around a candle, trying to make their own crackers. One holds a cardboard tube, another stuffs it with curled paper and match heads, while a third writes a joke in pencil. "Why did the goose cross the road?" They argue over the answer. The boy with the pencil shrugs. Doesn't matter. It'll still bang. It doesn't bang. It smokes and fizzles. They shriek with laughter anyway. Elsewhere, in a more polished part of town, a mechanical shop sells. A wind-up angel that circles a tin tree and rings a bell. It costs a full week's wages for a mill worker. but someone buys it, carefully wrapped in brown paper and string. Perhaps it will be unwrapped by candlelight. Perhaps it will fail to work after a week. Perhaps none of that matters, because the holiday is no longer about what you have. It's about what you attempt. You don't need to feast to feel full. You need laughter, noise, and a shared moment of absurdity. At a pub, a group of coal porters take turns wearing the same pink paper crown, toasting each other with tin cups of watered-down ale. One of them stands on a chair and reads a joke in a booming voice. "What's red and goes up and down?" he shouts. "A tomato in an elevator!" The room groans. Someone throws a potato. Everyone howls. And just like that, in a room with no tree, no music, and barely enough to eat, Christmas happens. Not the royal kind, not the expensive kind, the invented kind. The kind where a crown costs a penny, a joke costs nothing, and joy echoes louder than any church bell. By the end of the week, the air over London feels changed. Not lighter, exactly, but busier. You walk through Camden early in the morning and catch the scent of something sweet riding on the cold. Nutmeg, treacle, maybe cinnamon if you squint your nose hard enough. It's not a feast, but it pretends to be, and the pretending seems to help. A young girl stands behind a bakery stall with her mother, selling rows of puddings tied in muslin. They're lopsided and sticky, but the girl beams as she says, "We steamed them ourselves. Took all night." Her mother looks exhausted but proud. "We used coal meant for the washroom," she whispers, "but it was worth it. They've sold 3 before you even walk away." At a toy stand down the street, tin trumpets gleam in the grey light, stacked beside painted spinning tops and puzzles shaped like cats and ships. Most are stamped "Made in Birmingham," mass-produced and packed in crates by the hundreds. A man lifts one and frowns. "Looks just like last year's," the vendor shrugs. "Aye, but it still makes noise. That's what the kiddies want." And he's right. One street over, you find a group of children forming an impromptu parade. They've armed themselves with whatever they could afford. Bells, whistles, hollow canes to bang against the bricks. One child wears a cardboard crown and leads the others through puddles like a general in a marching band. They make a joyful racket. A bootmaker yells from a window, "Pipe down," but he's smiling. This is something new for London, noise for the sake of joy. Before, the city's sounds were industrial, steam, hammers, shouting, foremen. But now, laughter is beginning to rise up through the cracks, and much of it is courtesy of penny toys, small, cheap, mechanical, and magical. You stop at a workshop run by a man named Mr. Lyle, who calls himself a toy engineer. He's surrounded by springs, gears, and wooden limbs. You watch as he assembles a dancing bear that moves like it's had too much brandy. "Sold 20 last week," he grins. They fall apart in 3 days, but the smile lasts longer. That seems to be the secret of it all. The joy isn't in the durability, it's in the delivery. In handing over a wrapped bundle and watching someone's eyes widen. In cranking a key and laughing as a goose waddles crookedly across a tabletop. In finding wonder for just long enough to forget the soot in your socks. You visit a toy warehouse near the river, an enormous brick structure filled with crates stacked like sugar loaves. Inside, children with smudged faces and nimble fingers pack whistles and dolls into boxes fast and silent. A man shouts from the floor below, "Get the drums out first. The Queen's parcel goes tonight." The irony isn't lost on anyone. The gifts sent to palaces are packed by the smallest, coldest hands in the city. You catch one boy slipping a carved button into a box as a joke. A tiny secret. He'll never see discovered. He notices you watching and winks. "Better than a joke paper," he says. "Might give some prints a fright." These toys are simple. Tin frogs, wooden soldiers, cloth mice with mismatched eyes. They chirp, clatter, tumble, and break. But they also connect people who'd never otherwise share a word. workers to royals, city to countryside, stranger to stranger. And as the barrels roll out towards shops and markets and steam trains bound for every edge of Britain, you realise something important. Christmas has become exportable, packaged, portable, wrapped in ribbon and ready for 1,000 firesides, and it all fits in the palm of a child's hand. Later that evening, you find yourself in a small alley near Seven Dials, drawn by a curious sound, a rhythmic clacking followed by bursts of laughter. You turn the corner and discover a group of children, barefoot, soot-faced, and entirely absorbed in racing tin beetles along the edge of a broken curb. The toys aren't fancy. Most are dented or missing legs. One is just a bent spoon with a cork glued to it. But the rules are strict, the competition fierce, and the cheering louder than you'd expect from kids who haven't had supper. One girl holds up her prize, a hand-stitched pouch filled with marbles. "Best beetle wins," she says. "No crying if yours flips." A group of dock workers on their way home stop to watch. One man grins and tosses a coin to the girl. For the champion! She catches it without blinking, bows like royalty, and declares a rematch. The others lean against the wall, laughing like they've just remembered something warm. You walk on past a confectioner's stall where sugar mice and peppermint sticks sit in crooked rows. They're not cheap, but they're not unreachable either. A mother counts out farthings while her children debate flavours. The vendor wraps each sweet in wax paper as carefully as if it were jewellery. Just across the way, a toy shop window glows with golden lamplight. Inside is a mechanical marvel, a miniature stagecoach that winds up and rumbles across the display, complete with horses and tiny painted wheels. It's surrounded by a snowy diorama made from cotton and glitter. Children gather outside the glass, their breath fogging the panes. One boy presses both hands to the window and whispers, "Imagine if it were real." His friend shakes his head. Wouldn't know where to drive it. Neither laughs. It's not a joke. It's a kind of longing, the kind born in children who know too well that their joy must fit into small, affordable shapes. You head into the shop and watch the owner arrange items behind the counter. He shows you a set of clockwork birds, each with a different note. They don't sing well, he admits, but they chirp just enough. He smiles. You don't need full songs at Christmas, just a bit of noise in the right place. Outside, the crowds thicken. A man in a tall hat plays a hurdy-gurdy, its crank spinning out wheezy carols while his daughter dances with ribbons in her hands. She's no taller than his knee, but spins with the full confidence of a stage star. A box sits open for coins. Some give, some don't. She dances either way. Above them, in a window framed by frost, a little boy sits alone holding a jack-in-the-box. He cranks it once, twice, waits. It pops. He flinches. Then he laughs. Alone, but not lonely. The toy's enough. And maybe that's what makes this version of Christmas so peculiar. It doesn't aim for perfection. It accepts chipped paint and crooked arms, off-key songs and jokes that barely make sense. It's a celebration stitched together by factory seconds and penny dreams. But it works. Because in a city built on routine and soot and struggle, even the smallest surprise, a spring-loaded frog, a spinning top, a cracker that explodes with a paper crown and a pun, can spark real wonder. The toys don't last. They aren't meant to. But their memory lingers, tucked into drawers, retold in stories, or handed off to the next child in line. And in that act, passing joy from one small hand to another, Christmas begins to feel less like an invention and more like a tradition that was always waiting to be remembered. The snow has mostly melted now, leaving behind slick cobbles and puddles full of soot. But something else lingers in the air, a hum, almost musical, though no tune is playing. You follow it through a maze of side streets until you come to a narrow churchyard. The gates open, the ground uneven with frost-heaved stones. There a handful of people are gathered, not in pews or for a sermon, but outside, coats buttoned to their necks, breath clouding as they sing. No hymnals, no banners, just voices, untrained and imperfect, rising and falling like smoke. They're singing old songs, but not ones from pulpits. These are folk tunes, ancient things, half forgotten and restitched. Songs about holly and ivy, robins in snow, lovers waiting in winter. You don't know all the words, but the sound tugs at something familiar. A woman beside you whispers, "It's a collecting group. They go from town to town writing down old songs before they vanish." You glance at the man scribbling furiously in a notebook, his pencil dark with rain. Another woman nearby nods, adding, "He says these were never meant for choirs. They belong to kitchens, fields, firesides." That makes sense. The music isn't grand. It's cosy, rough around the edges, but with a rhythm that matches walking pace, stirring pace, stitching pace. These aren't carols for performance. They're songs to live by. Later, you trail one of the singers through a winding market lane. She's humming something under her breath, carrying a basket of bread. When you ask about the tune, she smiles. "My gran sang it. Thought it was a lullaby. Turns out it's a wassail," she shrugs. "What's the difference?" You pass a row of shops where the doors are propped open, not for customers, but for sound. A butcher whistles a carol while sharpening his knives. A seamstress hums while fitting a dress. Even a street sweep taps his broom to the beat of some invisible rhythm. These aren't concert halls, they're workspaces. And yet music has returned to the city, not blasted or commanded, but creeping in through cracks. You find a carpenter in Whitechapel sanding a banister while a girl nearby plays a whistle. She's out of tune, out of breath, and radiant. He doesn't stop her. "Better that than coughing," he mutters, grinning. Later, a group of coal porters sit outside a tavern, passing around a bottle and singing in harmony. Their voices are deep, rough, full of laughter. The lyrics are nonsense, something about pigs in waistcoats, but the sound is warm and real. One man belts a final note so loudly that a pigeon falls from a windowsill above and flutters off in protest. Everyone roars. Not far from there, in an alley where icicles hang like daggers from the eaves, a small choir of children sings for pennies. They've dressed in old curtains and hats with sprigs of pine poke through. Their cheeks are red, their pitch uncertain, their harmony fragile. But when they sing the last line of "Here we come a wassailing," even the grocer in the doorway wipes his eye. You ask the oldest girl where she learned the words. "Don't know," she shrugs. "They just sound like winter." That's the truth of it. The songs aren't always understood, but they belong to the season. You keep walking, the echo of half-finished carols trailing behind like chimney smoke. At first, the melodies feel random, scraps from old ballads, folk tunes warped by time. But as the hours stretch on, a strange pattern begins to emerge. In almost every district someone's humming, not the same song, but the same need. From Chelsea to Shoreditch, Brixton to Bethnal Green, voices rise in cold kitchens and echo off cobblestones. And most of them aren't singing for applause. They're singing because somehow it makes the winter feel less endless. You pass a laundress rinsing sheets in grey water, murmuring a song you can't name, something about cattle lowing and a cradle in hay. You pass a tailor's apprentice tapping his shears in time with a rhythm only he hears. You pass a one-legged soldier outside a workhouse, singing not for coins, but because his voice is the only part of him still standing straight. There's something startlingly honest about these songs. They're messy, out of key, too loud or barely there, but they connect. Not just the rich and the poor, but the past and the present. A song you hear on Fleet Street was likely hummed in a Dorset barn 50 years ago. Another, barely more than a chant about pudding and beer, feels like it survived by accident, passed from mouths too stubborn to forget. You stop at a bookseller's stall near Holborn, where a pile of chapbooks lies fanned out like playing cards. One catches your eye. Carols collected by hand. Rural songs of winter. Inside are lyrics written in uneven script, often with no melody, sometimes with notes like, sung to the tune of an Irish drinking song. You flip to one that begins, "Bring us in no brown bread, bring us in no white," and ends with, "But bring us in good ale." The chorus is nothing but clapping. The bookseller chuckles. Reckon they sang that in fields, not churches. Elsewhere, in a rail station waiting room, you hear a boy singing quietly to his sister. His voice is cracking, the tune fragile, but she listens like it's the most beautiful thing in the world. When he finishes, she claps softly and says, "Again?" He nods. Outside, even the cab horses seem caught in the moment, hooves ticking against the street in time with a waltz played by a blind man and his concertina. The music swirls around your boots as you walk. You pass a milliner's shop where the apprentices are whistling while trimming hats. One of them stops mid-verse and says, "These songs, they're old as bones, but we sing them like they're ours, and that's the thing, they are theirs now." These carols, these tunes, once nearly lost, in the noise of smokestacks and sermons, are finding new life in parlours, pubs, and the spaces in between. You pause beneath a bridge as a group of navvies walk past, singing something raucous and borderline offensive about figgy pudding. A few bystanders shake their heads, but no one tells them to stop. It's winter, after all. People are allowed to make a bit of noise. You stand still for a long moment, letting the voices fade into the London dark. You realise you've stopped noticing where the songs come from. They just are. They belong to the city now, not sacred, not perfect, but alive. And maybe that's enough. It's nearing dusk when you spot him, a portly man in a thick green cloak trimmed with fur, a crown of holly on his head, and a walking stick carved with a laughing face. He's standing outside a pie shop handing out roasted chestnuts, booming with laughter so loud it startles a pigeon clean off a windowsill. Children stare, adults grin. A few give him a wide berth, unsure if he's a beggar in costume or some escaped actor. He calls himself Father Christmas. Not Santa Claus, not St. Nick. Just Father Christmas. And he looks nothing like the jolly red-robed figure you'll come to expect in later years. This version is older, earthier, less about reindeer and more about feasting. He smells like cider and smoked meat. His boots are muddy. His fingers are stained with walnut ink. And when he laughs, it sounds like a song sung by firelight. You ask him where he's from and he replies, "The woods, of course," then winks. "But lately the shops." That's not entirely wrong. For centuries, Father Christmas existed as a symbol of winter hospitality. Not gift-giving, but good cheer, food and drink. A giant in green who might arrive at your door during the solstice and demand you pour him a pint and roast an extra goose. But lately he's been changing. Or rather, being changed. You wander into a print shop and leaf through the latest holiday broadsheets. Some still show Father Christmas in green robes, surrounded by ivy and mischief. Others have begun to paint him slimmer, smiling more sweetly, riding sleighs. One pamphlet calls him the spirit of the season. Another, more boldly, names him the gift giver. The transformation is subtle, but it's there. He's shedding his ancient wildness, his muddy boots and ale-drenched jokes, and becoming something newer, cleaner, quieter, and, perhaps most tellingly, commercial. Outside a toy shop you see him again. Only this time he's made of wood, standing in the window painted red with white trim. He holds a sack over one shoulder and smiles with the mild, blank expression of someone carved by committee. Next to him sits a sign, Santa Claus approved, and below that, imported from America. You blink. So that's where it's coming from. The name, the red robe, the sleigh pulled by reindeer. It's been drifting across the Atlantic on ships filled with cotton, books, and sugar. You remember hearing it whispered in taverns. The Dutch called him Sinterklaas. The Americans turned him into Santa. And now, he's here, shaking hands with Father Christmas and slowly taking his place. But for now, they both exist, sometimes even side by side. You see one child with a card showing the old green-robed man holding a bowl of punch, and another with a drawing of a red-suited figure handing out toys. Neither child seems confused, they just smile. It's a blending of symbols, a merging of myths. And London, ever practical, is adopting whichever version sells the most, crackers. Yet in a quiet alley you spot something different, a chalk drawing on a wall. It shows a figure in patchwork robes, tall and smiling, with stars on his cloak and snowflakes for eyes. No name, no brand, just a message. He brings warmth. And maybe that's the only thing that matters. You head east, toward the wharves, where the alleys grow narrower and the soot thicker. Along the way, the many faces of Father Christmas appear again and again, on posters, in card shop windows, painted on barrels of cheap ale, and none of them match. Some wear crowns of ivy, others red hoods, some carry sacks, some raise goblets. One mural even shows him playing the fiddle with a rat in a waistcoat clapping along. The city hasn't chosen a version yet. It's still experimenting, still blending folklore and fashion, printing cheer on whatever surface will take ink. Outside a print stall in Spitalfields, you meet a woman named Edna selling hand-coloured cards. She holds up one she painted herself. "This one's my favourite," she says, beaming. It shows an older man with a crooked staff leading a group of children into the woods. They're laughing. One holds a lantern. "He's not Santa," she says. "He's just winter. The nice part." You ask if people buy many like that. "Not anymore," she says. "They want jolly cheeks now, fat bellies, easier to trust a smile than a mystery." She's not bitter, just observant. You leave Edna's stall and continue on, winding through pockets of London where the holiday hasn't quite reached yet. Streets where Christmas still means one extra candle, maybe 2 extra potatoes, and a warm stone wrapped in rags to hold through the night. And yet, even here, he shows up. You spot him chalked on a schoolhouse wall, this time with reindeer drawn beside him, badly proportioned but full of motion. The children who drew him used different coloured chalk for the cloak, half green, half red, like they couldn't decide which version to believe in. In a tailor's shop, a customer requests a red-trimmed coat for his son, just like the one Santa wears. The tailor hesitates. "That's not what he wore when I was a lad." But he makes it anyway. The boy beams in the mirror. That's all that matters. At the post office, crates marked Lapland sit ready to be shipped. Letters to a man no one has ever seen, but whom everyone seems to trust. You pick one up, unsigned, written in pencil. It simply says, "Please help my ma. She says we're fine, but I know she cries when I sleep." You put it back. Not every child wants toys. Some just want the idea of someone out there, someone who might bring relief, if not miracles. As night falls, you find yourself near Hyde Park, where carriages line the street and the wealthier families take evening strolls to show off their winter coats. A young woman in satin lifts her skirts to avoid the puddles, laughing behind her gloves. Her brother offers her a paper crown from a cracker. She declines. "It's for children," she says, but he tucks it into her bonnet anyway and they both laugh. Across the park, a group of orphans press against the gates watching. They're not laughing. They don't have crackers. They don't have coats. but one of them pulls a scrap of cloth from his pocket and wraps it around the others like a magic cape. "Now you're the king," he says, "and I'm the pudding thief." They begin to play. Behind them, on the wall, someone has scrawled a message in charcoal. He sees you when you're sleeping. It's half a warning, half a promise. Father Christmas, or Santa, or whoever he's becoming, has taken on many shapes. But in all of them, there's one thread: watchfulness. Not for mischief, for need. And slowly, the city begins to reflect that. Not just with toys and cards, but with glances, with gifts of warmth, with laughter shared between strangers. And in every shop window, his smile watches back. London, for all its stone and soot, is a city built for shadows. And on this particular December evening, those shadows seem to stretch a little longer, cling a little tighter to the corners of windows and the rims of gas lamps. The wind whistles through the alleyways like an old song sung badly, and the fog carries with it a peculiar mood, restless, watchful, almost expectant. You find yourself near the edge of Islington, where the homes are tight together and the chimneys constantly breathing. But for once the smoke isn't just coal, it's candle wax and roasting onions and something faintly sweet. People are settling in. It's Christmas Eve, and that means one thing: story time. You duck into a boarding house lit from within. It's nothing special: peeling wallpaper, cracked ceiling, an old dog asleep by the hearth. But tonight there's a fire going, and in front of it, a woman in a patched shawl tells a tale to a half-circle of children sitting cross-legged in mismatched socks. Her voice is low, hushed like it's part of the fire. She's spinning a story about a wandering man who knocks on doors during the coldest night of the year. If you welcome him in, she says, he brings warmth and leaves coins in your shoes. But if you turn him away, your hearth goes cold for a month. The children gasp. One clutches a slipper like it's suddenly valuable. Another asks, "Is he real?" The woman smiles, her face lined but kind. He's real enough if you believe in visitors. Outside, in the street, a group of boys huddle beneath a doorway, not quite hiding, not quite ready to go home. One holds a candle stub. Another has a sack with a bell tied to the end. "What if we tell ghost stories tonight?" one whispers. "Like they used to?" You pause. Ghost stories? On Christmas Eve? Yes. That's the part no one tells you anymore. In the Victorian age, the night before Christmas wasn't just for cheer and pudding, it was for ghosts. Not the kind that rattle chains and moan, but the quiet sort. The ones that slip into rooms unnoticed. The ones that ride the back of memory. You slip into a tavern where the candles burn lower than usual, and the conversation leans toward whispers. A man with a red nose leans close to his companions and begins a tale about a carriage that rolls past his flat every Christmas Eve at midnight, but with no horses, no driver, just the creak of wheels. Another woman adds her story about the knock at the door that comes every year, always at the same hour, though no one's ever there. These aren't ghost stories to scare. They're ghost stories to connect, to remind people of the past, of what lingers, of who they've lost. You find more of them as the night deepens. In one tenement, a family sits around the fire telling stories of an uncle who vanished during a blizzard and whose boots still creak on the stairs each December. In another, a boy says he dreams of a lady in a white dress who stands at the foot of his bed and sings a song no one else knows. Even in the better homes, the drawing rooms flicker with strange tales. Not everyone believes them, but everyone listens, and that's the point. Because Christmas Eve, in this city, is when the veil between then and now grows thin. It's not just about presents, it's about presence, of memory, of voices, of footsteps long gone. You step out into the street again, and everything feels slower, softer. The gaslight bends like it's caught in a dream, and every window glows with the golden hush of people remembering things they didn't know they'd forgotten. It's not haunting, it's comforting. The past is still here. You just have to sit still long enough to hear it knock. You keep walking, your boots muffled by a thin sheet of snow that's returned overnight, coating London in a hush. And though the city is never truly quiet, tonight it feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something, maybe even someone. A flickering window near Clerkenwell draws your attention. You peer inside and see 3 generations gathered around a hearth. The youngest sits cross-legged with a biscuit in one hand, and wide eyes fixed on an older man with wild eyebrows and a coal-scarred hand. He's halfway through a tale, something about a coal cart that rolled uphill one Christmas Eve, pulled by no horse, guided by a lantern that flickered blue. The child interrupts. Was it a ghost? The old man smirks. It was a memory wearing boots. You don't stay long, but the words follow you. Outside, you spot a woman arranging apples and gingerbread on a plate. Not for herself, not even for her children. It's for the visitor, she says with a shrug when her neighbour teases her, just in case. The neighbour rolls her eyes, but that night she leaves out a heel of bread and a thimble of ale. Also, just in case. Because here's the quiet truth of Christmas Eve in the Victorian age. Ghosts weren't feared. They were invited. The stories told weren't meant to terrify, but to remember, to speak aloud the names no longer spoken, to leave space at the table where someone used to sit, to make peace with the idea that the past doesn't really leave, it just quiets. In one bakery, the flour-covered apprentice tells his master that he once saw his grandfather sitting in the corner of the shop on Christmas Eve, long after the man had passed. Didn't say nothing, he adds, brushing sugar from his hands, just nodded like he was checking the work. In a boarding house attic, a girl swears her mother hums a lullaby every Christmas Eve from the next room. Her roommate reminds her. Her mother died 3 winters ago. The girl only smiles, still knows the tune. None of these moments are loud. They're barely noticed, like a floorboard that creaks at the right moment, or a draft that carries a scent no one else smells. But for those who wait, who listen, who believe just a little more after midnight, they're real. You visit a lamplighter's hut just before he makes his final round. He sits hunched over a mug, staring into the flame. When you ask if he's all right, he says, "Every year around this time I feel someone walking behind me. Never look back, though. That's the trick." Then he grabs his pole and vanishes into the dark. Even the postboys delivering late-night cards move with a strange reverence. They whistle low tunes, glance up at empty windows, and speak in half voices. They won't admit they're spooked, but they're not rushing either. At the river's edge, you find a man in a long coat tossing breadcrumbs into the water. When you ask why, he says, "For my brother. He used to do it on Christmas Eve. Figured someone should carry on." You ask how long it's been. He shrugs. Decades. Then smiles. But he still deserves a breadcrumb. There's no name for this kind of ritual. It's not sacred. It's not written. But it matters. Because in this new version of Christmas, built from crackers and cards and puddings and penny toys, the past still insists on being invited. Not as a burden, but as a companion. And as the clock nears midnight, you feel it too. Not fear, not sorrow, just the sense that you're not walking alone, that every snow-covered doorstep holds a memory, that every flickering flame might be warming someone you cannot see, and somehow that's the most comforting part of all. It's Christmas morning now, the light is pale but soft, and for once London wakes gently. Not with the shriek of factory whistles or the clatter of milk carts, but with something quieter, the creak of floorboards, the clink of teacups, the rustle of paper, wrapping being carefully unwrapped, then rewrapped, just in case it needs to be used again next year. You walk through Kensington, where the houses rise in elegant rows, their windows lined with lace. Through the glass, you glimpse a grand dining room, the table set with such precision it almost looks like a painting. Polished silver glints beside bone china. Sprigs of holly lie across each napkin. A roast goose, glazed, golden, nearly glowing, waits at the centre like a crown jewel. At one end of the table, a boy in a velvet jacket fidgets while a governess straightens his collar. At the other, a woman whispers to a maid checking the arrangement of fig preserves. The father reads from a newspaper, not looking up. The fire crackles. Everything is in order. You move on, past the servants' entrance around the back, where a smaller door creaks open and a kitchen maid steps out, fanning herself with a sooty apron. Her cheeks are flushed, her sleeves rolled, and a faint smear of flour dusts her chin. She lights a quick cigarette and leans against the wall. When she sees you, she smirks. 6 courses, she mutters, all for people who'll eat half and talk through the rest. Inside, the kitchen is its own world, steam rising from pots, copper pans clanging, orders barked and echoed. A scullery boy sneaks a spoonful of something and nearly loses a finger. The cook, red-faced and glorious, stirs a pudding like he's conducting an orchestra. There's laughter down here. Exhaustion too, yes, but a kind of chaos that feels alive. Unlike the stiff grace of the dining room above, this celebration has motion. One maid pulls a cracker with the delivery boy and shrieks when it explodes. A paper crown lands in the butter. Someone breaks into a verse of the roast beef of Old England before being shushed and giggled into silence. Back on the street you pass a cart carrying barrels of wine and a string of geese hanging by their feet. The driver snaps the reins with the glee of someone who knows today will be profitable. "Better hurry," he calls to no one. "The rich are still hungry." In a townhouse 2 blocks away you glimpse another kind of feast, smaller, more private. A widow sits alone at a lace-covered table, stirring her tea with careful grace. Beside her, 2 places are set but untouched. On the 3rd plate, a single mince pie, neatly halved. She lifts her glass in silence, then sips. It's a different kind of feast. One made not of abundance, but of memory. You head east, and the houses change. Walls closer together, stoops narrower. But here too the smell of roasting fills the air. Not goose, but beef bones and onion, stewing slowly in pots. A man in shirt sleeves leans out a window and shouts across the way, "Oi, Mrs. Lang, that turkey I smell," she shouts back. "Dream on, it's turnip and lies." They both laugh. And here's where things get complicated, because while the upper streets are full of tradition polished to perfection, the lower streets are full of something else. Invention. You walk past a family crammed around a table too small, carving a roast potato like it's fine duck. The father raises a chipped mug and declares, "To everything we nearly forgot." Everyone cheers. Someone lights a stub of candle, and somehow in that flickering moment it feels just as grand as the table in Kensington. Farther down the street the scene shifts again. You find yourself in a converted stable, now home to 3 families sharing what space they can. In the corner, 2 women take turns flipping a makeshift pudding over an open flame, a muslin-wrapped ball of flour, dried fruit, and whatever sugar they could afford. One of the children peers at it eagerly. "Will there be a 6pence inside?" he asks. The older woman laughs. "Only if the fairies dropped one in when I wasn't looking." She winks, then adds, "But if you find it, you owe me your washing up." They don't have enough chairs for everyone, so boxes are turned into stools, a crate becomes a table, and a broken window is plugged with a scarf. But the smiles come easily. Laughter doesn't care about furniture. Someone sings a song, off-key, loud, joyous. The pudding finally comes off the fire, steaming, dense, slightly lopsided. It's not beautiful, but it disappears within minutes, and here you realise something strange. Despite the cracked plates and second-hand cutlery, These tables feel more alive than the polished ones uptown. The candles flicker more freely. The paper crowns are torn and crooked but worn with pride. The jokes from the crackers, bad as they are, still earn belly laughs. In one corner, a grandfather tells a story about the first Christmas pudding he ever tasted. It had a burnt crust and a bone in it, he says. We thought the bone was lucky. He pauses, then adds, turned out it was from the dog's bowl, everyone roars. Outside, the sound of footsteps crunching frost marks a new arrival. A neighbour from down the road carries in a tray with 3 meat pies. She shrugs. We had extras. She didn't. But it doesn't matter. The pies are split 6 ways, and someone toasts her with a cracked teacup. This is what a shared feast looks like. Not elegant, not abundant, but stitched together from generosity and stubborn joy. Back in the city centre, the big hotels are hosting elaborate meals. Silver domes lifted to reveal glistening birds, servants in gloves pouring gravy from porcelain boats. The guests sit upright, napkins crisp, smiles polite. Toasts are made. The clink of crystal is perfect, practiced. And yet, as you pass by one of those tall windows, you notice a boy outside, watching the diners. He doesn't look jealous, just curious. He's eating a roll of bread stuffed with something spicy and steaming, a gift perhaps from someone who remembered. He watches for a moment longer, then turns and skips back toward the alleys, where a group of other children are building a snowman with buttons, ash and a hat made from an old boot. They're laughing like kings. One girl sings a song about pudding and paper hats. The words don't rhyme. The tune doesn't exist. It's new, invented on the spot, but it's theirs. And that's what strikes you most, how every table in London is celebrating something slightly different. In Belgravia, it's precision. In the East End, it's defiance. In the kitchens below stairs, it's survival. In the stables and cellars and single-room homes, it's invention. Not everyone has a goose. Not everyone has a tree. Not everyone even has shoes. But across all of them, from the velvet feasts to the turnip banquets, one truth holds. You don't need abundance to create tradition. You just need enough warmth to share. And this year, at last, that warmth is everywhere. As the morning fades into afternoon, you drift farther east, where the buildings sag, the gutters run black, and the streets are quieter not because they're peaceful, but because not much happens here, except today. Today, you find yourself at the gates of the workhouse. Iron bars, brick walls, a place built to sort the desperate from the dangerous, the idle from the deserving. And yet even here, where most holidays are marked only by smaller portions and harder beds, something strange is happening. A woman with a clipboard stands at the gate frowning as a delivery boy unloads a cart of potatoes, onions and, wait, 2 small geese. Not enough to feed the whole building, but enough for a symbolic gesture. Courtesy of a local benefactor, she says without conviction. Anonymous, of course. Inside, the ward matron walks briskly, barking instructions to the cook. No brandy in the pudding. Don't tempt them. And keep the skins on the potatoes. Peels are nutritious. But behind her back, someone slips a knob of butter into the pot. Another sneaks in a pinch of cloves. In the children's wing, a low table is laid with enamel mugs and rough bread. It doesn't look festive. Until a boy pulls something from his pocket. A crumpled card, clearly used before, folded and faded. On the front is a sketch of a robin. He props it up against a spoon. The others gather around it like it's a centerpiece. One girl reaches beneath the table and pulls out a cracker. Just one. Found it behind the pantry door, she whispers. They take turns holding it, unsure whether to pull it at all. Finally they do. It pops, quietly, and spills out a pink paper crown and a joke too smudged to read. The boy who wore the crown last year insists it still fits him best. A scuffle breaks out, then laughter. You move through the corridors. In one room, a volunteer reads a story about a mouse who finds a peppermint stick and shares it with a shivering fox. In another, a nurse hands out oranges, real oranges, speckled and slightly bruised. The residents cradle them like glass. Not everyone joins in. Some of the elderly sit in silence, their eyes fixed on the window, watching the snow fall in slow, uncertain flakes. One man mutters, "Not worth the fuss. Cold is cold, pudding or no pudding." But a woman beside him nudges his arm and slips half her portion onto his plate without saying a word. You stop at the infirmary, where one of the attendants has arranged 3 candles on a bedside table. No one's allowed open flames in here, but she's put them in jam jars and no one complains. She hums while she works, some old melody that could be a lullaby or a forgotten carol. Outside the kitchen, a group of volunteers from the middle-class parish arrive with a hamper. Inside, apples, biscuits, knitted scarves. One man reads a list aloud like he's afraid of sounding too kind, but the children don't care. They grab at the parcels with nervous delight. One girl holds up a red mitten and beams like it's been spun from gold. A boy leans over and whispers, "We don't usually get mittens, or oranges, or songs." You ask him why today is different. He shrugs. They said it's Christmas. Maybe that means something now. And in this place where everything has always been earned, tracked, and measured, that sentence feels like a revolution. You leave the children's wing and wander deeper into the workhouse, where the light dims and the walls narrow. This is where the older men sleep, labourers worn down to shadows, shoulders hunched from years of hauling, building, bending. In one corner, a man is polishing his boots with a rag so thin it's nearly transparent. Not because anyone will see them, just because it's what he used to do on Christmas morning, back when there was someone waiting at the table and steam on the window and a cat winding between his legs. Across the hall, 2 men play dominoes with pieces carved from bone. One mutters, "Used to be I'd get a bottle today. Not a good bottle, mind, just one that stung less going down." The other snorts, "Be glad you got teeth left to chew the biscuit." Still, they play on, slowly, steadily, like ritual matters more than reward. In the dining room, the cook has done her best. The potatoes are watery but hot. The meat is thin but tender. The pudding jiggles as it should. There's even a ladle of custard, thinned to stretching point. When she slaps a spoonful onto each tin plate, she adds a wink, like it's part of the flavour. And something remarkable happens. No one complains. One man, new to the workhouse, still with the calluses of someone recently useful, stands up and offers a toast with his chipped cup of weak tea. To the people outside, who remember we exist. He sits quickly, embarrassed. But several men raise their cups anyway. One whispers, "First toast I've heard in 10 years. After the meal, someone starts to sing. It's not a carol, more of a pub song, something about a sailor and a chicken that got loose in a cathedral. But the chorus is loud and the clapping keeps time. The woman who slipped butter into the stew earlier taps her foot to the beat, smirking. You step outside for air. Snow is falling again, this time finer, more confident. Across the yard, a group of children are building a snowman using borrowed mittens and an old boot. A single paper crown, flattened from too many heads, rests on its slushy brow. And then you hear it. Bells. Not from a church or a stagecoach, but from a pushcart wobbling down the road. Atop it stands a man in a moth-eaten coat with a cowbell in each hand. "Who wants a miracle?" he cries. "First one's free!" The children squeal. Even the older residents peek through the windows, curiosity outlasting weariness. The man begins handing out trinkets. A thimble here, a carved button there, a paper scrap with a joke written in purple ink. None of it useful, all of it priceless. When he's done, he tips his battered hat. "That's it for this year. You'll have to be extra sad next time if you want something better." He winks. The snowman gets a second crown. Inside, the fire burns low but steady. One woman sits with her knitting, making something red and woolly without a clear shape. Maybe a scarf, she says, or maybe just something warm-looking. And that's the heart of it. In a building built to erase the festive from the poor, people are reclaiming their right to joy, not because they've earned it, but because they need it. A boy with one mitten and pudding still on his chin looks up and asks, "Will we get Christmas next year too?" You pause, uncertain. Then you nod. If you remember it, you will. And he smiles like that's the best promise he's ever heard. By late afternoon, the sun hangs low and reluctant, brushing the chimney tops with a dusky gold. The snow hasn't stopped, but now it falls in lazy spirals, clinging to gutters and muffling the sound of hooves and wheels on the cobblestones. You drift west again, where the houses grow taller, the hats get shinier, and the curtains thicker. Inside one of these well-appointed homes, something's brewing, but not in the parlour. It's in the drawing room, where a group of women sit sipping tea and plotting the future of Christmas itself. This is not a gathering for gossip, it's a committee, dressed in silks and shawls with notepads and spectacles, furrowed brows and ink-stained fingers. They are debating, fiercely, what next year's Christmas charity drive should look like. "Not just soup this time," says a tall woman in burgundy. "People need coats, boots, dignity." "Coats are expensive," sniffs another. "Not as expensive as children freezing," snaps a third, adjusting her pince-nez. They're the well-meaning warriors of the drawing room, philanthropists with time, money, and a desire to use both. But even here you notice something interesting. This isn't just duty. It's not even about guilt. It's about momentum. Because once a Christmas tradition begins, even a modern one invented last Tuesday, it has a strange way of sticking. One of the women points out how the royal family's Christmas tree last year made everyone want one. Another mentions the flood of letters her postman had to deliver. Children's wish lists mostly, addressed to Father Christmas with no postage. She keeps one in her handbag, folded and creased. It's written in pencil on scrap paper and reads, "Dear Sir, I want a book, a real one, with no pages torn out." She chokes a little reading it aloud. "We must do better." They all nod. You step back outside and wander along the rows of upscale homes. At several, musicians have been invited to perform in foyers and front parlours, harpists, fiddlers, even a few singers. One quartet sings a slightly off-pitch version of The Holly and the Ivy, while a guest near the porch sherry whispers to his wife, "They'll be in Covent Garden by spring." Around the corner, another group of singers makes their way door to door, but not for pay. These are neighbourhood children, some in coats too big, others in shoes too small, singing for fun, for sweets, for tradition. They stand under a gas lamp that flickers uncertainly in the wind, belting out lines with more enthusiasm than accuracy. And when they hit the end of Good King Wenceslas, a woman leans out the window and drops down a wrapped loaf. "Still warm," she calls. The children scatter, squealing and passing the parcel between them like it's treasure. It is. But not every house opens its windows. One man on a balcony yells, "It's not Christmas if I can still hear myself think." The children boo in unison, then break into a louder verse, and you realise Christmas has started to leak, out of the parlours and into the streets, out of the hymn books and into the alleys. It's no longer just something done by the rich or endured by the poor. It's being rewritten, not with laws or sermons, but with loaves, laughter, mittens and paper crowns. And like all the best stories, no one really knows who wrote the first line. Farther down the block, you stop at a house with no singing, no laughter, just the soft click of a typewriter. Tap, tap, ding, tap, tap, ding. Inside, a man sits hunched over his desk, spectacles sliding down his nose, ink smudged on his cuffs. He's writing something peculiar. Not a letter, not a report, but a story. One set during Christmas, though the room smells more of ink and coal dust than chestnuts and spice. He pauses, reads a sentence aloud. Even the poorest man may feast, if only in memory. Then he sighs, crosses it out, and starts again. This isn't Charles Dickens, not this time, but it might as well be. Across London, writers, real ones, hopeful ones, desperate ones, are now using Christmas as setting, symbol, or solution. And why not? The season is ripe with contradiction. Poverty and opulence, joy and grief, hope and frostbite. A woman 2 floors up pens a poem about a snowflake that lands on a widow's tea and reminds her to live again. A printer's apprentice in Soho sketches a cartoon of a Christmas pudding exploding in a vicar's face. A former chimney sweep, now half literate, starts a diary entry. Today I saw a rich man give his gloves to a dog. All over the city, Christmas is becoming the canvas for reinvention. Not just of self, but of story. Even the newspapers are catching on. This morning's headlines were still politics and grain shortages, but on page 4, a column titled Odd Christmas Sightings. Today's entry. 3 chimney sweeps were seen carolling in Wapping dressed in curtains, with a roasted beet balanced on a borrowed tray. Witnesses claim they sang Silent Night in harmony before eating the beet and bowing. One claimed to be king of the crack teapots. No arrests made. You can't help but smile. The world may be divided, by class, by brick walls, by silverware, but nonsense leaks through every crack. You turn into a narrower alley now, where the scent of roasted chestnuts wafts from a brazier on wheels. The vendor is wrapped in scarves, only his eyes visible. When asked for a price, he shrugs. Pay what you've got, or owe me a song. One boy sings Deck the Halls while juggling 3 chestnuts. Another recites a rhyme about pudding and politics. An older gentleman simply hums God Rest Ye Merry with a voice rough as boot leather. Each one walks away warmer. At the end of the alley you find something unexpected. A small stage, barely more than a crate and a lamp. A girl, no more than 16, stands atop it, reading aloud from a tattered book. Her voice shakes, but her eyes burn bright. It's a story of a man who once hated Christmas until a ghost showed him the truth. Not Dickens, not exactly, just close enough to ring familiar. The crowd claps when she finishes. A hat is passed. Coins clink. Someone shouts, "Tell another!" And you realise in this tucked-away pocket of London, Christmas has become theatre. Not in the grand halls or ticketed venues, but on crates, corners and curbstones. It's raw, it's cold, but it's real. And as night begins to press its dark thumb across the rooftops, that rawness becomes something electric. Stories, songs, laughter, they're kindling. And across the city they're catching fire. Night in Victorian London arrives like a closing curtain. Slow, deliberate and heavy. Street lamps flicker to life one by one, their gas-like glow casting amber halos on the wet cobbles. The air thickens with smoke and snow, and the faint scent of tallow from thousands of candles behind lace-draped windows. You find yourself drawn toward the river now, where the Thames winds like a black ribbon through the heart of the city. Along its banks the mood is different. Less sparkle, more silence, but not absence. Something stirring here too. A floating barge near Suffolk glows faintly from within. You approach and hear voices, laughter, a whistle. Inside, a crew of coal workers, off shift, still soot-faced and tired, have turned their cramped mess hall into a holiday tavern. There's no piano. But someone beats time on a bucket lid. Another man pulls out a harmonica and wheezes out a ragged tune. There's a jug of something strong, possibly legal, possibly not. It passes from hand to hand like Holy Communion. One man stands, shirt half untucked, and recites a poem about a rat who snuck into a bakery and made off with a mince pie. The punchline? The rat said it tasted better than the wages of sin. The men howl. You spot a small fir branch tacked to the ceiling. It's wilting, dusted with coal flakes, but it's something. Someone's tied a red ribbon around it. Another has scrawled "Merry Whatnot" on the wall in chalk. It's sloppy, and it's beautiful. Not far from the barge, a woman in a thick shawl sets up a table with tin cups and a steaming pot. She serves tea with condensed milk and stories. For every cup poured, she offers a tale, some real, some invented. To you, I'll tell the one about the chimney boy who climbed into a flue and came out with a bag of gold. To you, the girl who found a robin and kept it warm with buttons. No one corrects her. No one cares what's true. On a bench nearby, a couple wrapped in a single coat hum a lullaby to their sleeping child. The baby is bundled so tightly you can't even see its nose, just a knitted hat shaped like a goose's head. The couple rocks in time, not to music, but to memory. And over all this, above the cold, the coal, the kettles, the crumbling edges of the city, there's a sense of something holding. Not celebration exactly, but resistance. Because Christmas, in this forgotten corner by the water, is less about joy and more about not letting go. You climb the embankment steps toward the bridges, where a few carriages clatter across slick stones. One driver hums under his breath. Another tosses a half-eaten apple to a child crouched by a lamppost. The child catches it, stunned. He doesn't eat it, just holds it, like it might vanish if he blinks. You pass a dock worker slumped against a post, hands in his sleeves. He looks up and grunts. Bit warmer tonight. Must be the pudding fumes rising from the rich folk. He smirks. Then he adds, softer. Or maybe the ghosts are out. And just for a second, the river seems to shimmer. Across the bridge now, the city stretches wide. Its skyline a crooked crown of chimneys, steeples and factory stacks belching trails of smoke into the dark. Here on the northern bank you find yourself in Clerkenwell, where the shadows grow long between tall buildings and narrow courts. And here, too, Christmas refuses to disappear. You duck into a print shop, long since closed to customers, but alive with lamplight and the clack of a press still in motion. A wiry man with ink-stained fingers feeds sheets into the machine, humming something that might once have been a carol. He's printing flyers for a Christmas pantomime, a makeshift performance stage in an abandoned warehouse for children who wouldn't otherwise see one. The flyer reads, "Pudding, pirates, and a magical mop. 2 pennies or a smile." He grins when he sees you. "Started as a joke," he says. "Now we're sold out." He holds up one flyer to the lamplight and chuckles. "Use my last bit of red ink to give the mop a hat." The ink smells sharp, metallic, oddly nostalgic. You pocket a flyer. Farther along, a row of laundresses sits outside a steam-stained building, warming hands on cups of tea laced with vinegar and sugar. One of them pulls a cracker, not store-bought, but handmade with bits of twine and old newspaper. It pops like a pistol, and out falls a bent spoon and a joke. What do you get when you cross a goose with a chimney? A bird that honks soot. They groan in harmony, then burst into cackling laughter. You walk on. A boarding house window is lit with rows of candles stuck in glass bottles. In each window pane, a face. Someone watching the world pass, too tired to join but too hopeful to turn away. A young man lifts his mug to you. No words, just a nod. Down a side street you hear music, violin this time, not professional but passionate. A girl plays while her brother dances, stomping in rhythm atop a wooden crate. They've tied bells to his sleeves which jingle with every spin. A hat lies open on the ground, filled with buttons, a half-eaten scone and 3 farthings. Someone in the crowd tosses in a candle stub. Another drops a knitted mitten. A third places a crumpled piece of paper. The girl picks it up later. It's a drawing of them, crude but sweet, sketched in pencil by a child. And there it is again. That strange generosity, that Victorian instinct to give, even if it's odd, or small, or utterly useless. A man with a sandwich board walks past ringing a bell. His sign reads, "Don't forget tomorrow is still winter." No one laughs. They just nod. Because it's true. Christmas is a brief spell, a flicker, and tomorrow the frost comes back, the work resumes, the ink dries, and the joy is harder to find. But tonight, across rooftops and alleyways, that joy hangs in the air like chimney smoke, thin, persistent, impossible to bottle. You pause at a crossroads where the street lamps form a glowing triangle. From every direction sounds trickle in, songs, footsteps, a kettle's hiss, a child's giggle muffled by scarf and snow. And you realise something. It's not that people have forgotten this Christmas. It's that history forgot them. The ones who stitched joy out of nothing, who rewrote the season from the bottom up, who made paper crowns out of butcher's wrap and laughter from breadcrumbs. You stand very still, and the wind carries a scent you can't quite name, part coal, part cinnamon, part candle wax on old wood, and for a moment you feel it. Not nostalgia, not sorrow, something quieter, recognition. It's well past midnight now, and the city softens. The horses have gone quiet. The shopkeepers have latched their doors. Even the cold seems to have settled into a steady breath, exhaling through alleys and down gutters, like an old man sighing into his scarf. You follow the sound of footsteps, not your own, but a small quick rhythm. Boots on cobblestone, then on gravel. You trace it to a courtyard behind a bakery, where a girl, maybe 10 or 11, is rearranging empty crates into a square. She smooths a torn sheet across the top like a tablecloth. From her pocket she produces a single biscuit, 2 buttons, and what appears to be a cork stopper. She places each item carefully at the corners of the cloth, as if they're presents. She steps back, clasps her hands, and whispers, "Merry, merry." You don't interrupt. This is her celebration. No audience, no script, no warm fire or proper tree. But the reverence is real. Across the square, a night watchman hums as he sweeps. You've seen him before, earlier in the story, remember? The one who kept time by the tower bells and shared a meat pie with the lamplighter. He's back now, his coat buttoned all the way, moustache rimmed with frost. He sees the girl and tips his cap. Doesn't speak. Just nods and keeps sweeping in a slow, circular rhythm that could almost be a dance. Back on the street, the last of the carolers trail home. One group of chimney sweeps, faces still streaked with soot, sing in harmonies so loose they sound like waves lapping against a dock. Their lyrics morph mid-song into made-up verses about sausages and falling down chimneys. They pass a constable who doesn't stop them, just mutters, "Keep it cheerful, lads," and continues on. Not far off, a cat darts across your path, pausing to eye you like you're trespassing. Then it disappears into a crate marked "Eggs, handle with care." It's unclear if there are still eggs inside. You drift further and come upon a pair of elderly sisters sitting on a bench, each wearing identical coats, one with a sprig of holly tucked into her hatband. They're peeling apples together, dropping the skins onto the pavement in long curls. They murmur to one another, then laugh, then fall silent again. One finally says, "Remember when Ma put cloves in everything, even the soap?" The other replies, "And we stank like a roast." More laughter. Then stillness. There is a special kind of intimacy that only arrives in the hours after midnight, when the world isn't asleep, just paused. And in that pause, these strange little scenes bloom like frost patterns on a window pane. In the distance, the bell of St. Mary le Bow rings twice. You look up, half expecting to see the stars. But London's sky is too thick tonight. Only the soft orange glow of lamps and fires, bouncing off low clouds like a ceiling of embers. Still, you sense that up there, something is watching, not judging, just bearing witness, to the man lighting a pipe with a splinter from a Christmas crate, to the boy writing his name in snow with a stick, spelling it backwards, to the laundress hanging out a damp dress even now, hoping it might catch a breeze before morning, and to you, still walking, still curious, still awake. The farther you go, the quieter it becomes, not silent, but thick with that sleepy hush cities only get in the folds between one day and the next. You pause beside a horse trough frozen at the edges. A crow pecks at the ice, slips, and flutters off, leaving a single black feather behind. You pocket it. No reason, just impulse. This night is full of odd little keepsakes. A few doors down, you hear the soft shuffle of cards and low murmurs from behind a cracked open window. Inside, a group of seamstresses sits cross-legged on the floor, illuminated by lamplight and a half-burned tallow candle. They're playing a game of snap, but the deck has long lost its matching pairs. Each card is different, some hand-drawn replacements, others stolen from different games altogether. One girl slaps down a queen of spades with a cat's face drawn over it. Another lays a bent card that simply says Pudding King in charcoal scribble. When someone wins a round, they shout merry as instead of snap. One girl, no older than 15, ties a ribbon around her wrist every time she wins. By now she has 3. She says she'll trade them in the morning for extra tea. The others laugh, but she just shrugs. You never know. In another house, an elderly man is writing letters he'll never send. He seals each envelope with wax made from old candle stubs, addressing them to names you suspect are long gone. To Elsie, who baked the gingerbread. To Mr. Healy, who lent me the orange. He stacks them neatly, ties them with twine, and places them in a box labelled Winters. The lid won't quite close. At the bakery you passed earlier, the ovens are cold now, but the scent lingers. Vanilla, scorched sugar, yeast, and smoke. A boy kneels outside the shuttered door, nose pressed to the gap, breathing in dreams of rolls and warmth. Someone walks by and offers him half a meat pie wrapped in a handkerchief. The boy hesitates, then takes it wordlessly. The giver walks off without waiting. And that's how most kindness happens here. Wordless, unceremonious, passed like coals between cold hands. As you turn onto another lane, you notice the street is lined with buckets, not for fire, but for dripping icicles collected from eaves as windows. A curious tradition here. Some believe the melted water, when saved, brings luck. Others use it for brewing tea. A few just like the look of them. Crystal daggers growing from rooftops like decorations nature forgot to put away. Someone's tried to turn one into a flute. It doesn't work, but the effort earns a round of applause from a crowd of 2. A woman with a sack of coal and her daughter in mismatched gloves. Up ahead, you see something glimmering, tiny, strange, hypnotic. You approach to find dozens of glass bottles hung from a fence, each with a candle inside. The flickering lights dance across the glass, creating an accidental constellation on the wall behind. Each bottle holds a scrap of paper. Wishes. You read a few. Warm shoes for mother? A chimney that doesn't smoke? Let her say yes. Pudding again, please. A man stands nearby tending the flames, replacing the candles as they burn out. He doesn't ask for coins. He doesn't speak. Just keeps the lights going. Because in this city, on this forgotten Christmas, Even the most fragile light deserves to last just a little longer. The night is nearly exhausted now, worn at the edges like a well-used apron. But you're not ready to let go of it yet. There's still something humming in the air, some thread you haven't followed. So you wander deeper into the city's forgotten folds. You turn into a narrow mews lane, barely wide enough for two people to pass without brushing coats. It's lined with coal sheds and stables, most shuttered tight. But a few doors are open, spilling yellow lamplight and the occasional murmur of voices. In one such stable, a family of 5 is camped for the night. Their landlord evicted them 2 weeks ago, nothing unusual in London this winter. But the father found this corner and struck a deal with the stable master. Keep the place tidy, don't spook the horses, and you can sleep among the straw. You duck your head and step inside. The air is warm and smells of hay, sweat and oats. Not unpleasant. The father is mending his daughter's shoe with a length of twine and a nail he found in the street. The mother hums as she stirs a pot of something on a brazier made from an old tin. The youngest boy tugs on your sleeve and proudly shows you his toy, a spool of thread tied to a bent spoon. He calls it a rocket. You tell him it's marvellous. In the corner, someone's fashioned a tree out of broomsticks and rags. Buttons dangle like ornaments. A single candle burns in a clay jar at its base. It smells faintly of onions. The father looks up at you and says, "We told the children the Queen gave us this room for Christmas." He smiles. "It helps." And there it is again, the quiet pageantry of make-believe, stitched into survival. A kingdom of coal dust and stories. You leave them to their warmth and make your way further north, toward Camden. The streets are emptier here, lined with row houses and occasional shop fronts. You pass a pawn shop window where someone has arranged their display into a makeshift nativity, not religious, just familiar. A broken doll lies in a bed of cotton, surrounded by a tin soldier, a porcelain cat, and a shaving brush standing in for a shepherd's crook. A small sign reads, "None of them for sale, just for looking." It's signed simply, Bert. A few blocks over you hear singing, not boisterous carols but something softer, almost whispered. You follow it to a tenement block where a cluster of neighbours is gathered on the stoop swaying in rhythm. Some wear hats, others drape blankets around shoulders. One woman sings while knitting, her needles clacking in time. Another keeps time by tapping a spoon against a railing. A man plays a harmonica in a key that doesn't quite match, and yet it all fits. You lean against the opposite wall and close your eyes. The melody is imperfect but kind, and though you can't name the tune, you know the feeling. A lullaby for a city that refuses to stop dreaming. You leave the harmonica behind, but the tune lingers in your bones, like the warmth of a vanished fire or the echo of laughter in an empty hallway. Camden at this hour feels like a different country. The city's usual roar is muffled, replaced by the soft language of boots on snow, the hush of breath in scarves, and the whisper of curtains shifting behind closed windows. Up ahead, you spot an odd little procession. 3 children in mismatched cloaks march down the pavement with the solemnity of knights. One carries a wooden spoon like a sceptre, another holds a candle in a teacup. The third, a girl with only one shoe, leads the group with an air of regal authority, clutching a crumpled paper crown. They stop suddenly in front of a worn wooden door, kneel and sing something that sounds very much like "We wish you a merry egg tart." A man inside shuffles to the door, opens it, and without a word hands them a single potato. The girl lifts it high like treasure. "It's warm," she declares. They cheer like they've won a kingdom, then march on. You trail behind them for a few steps, then turn toward a side alley where the gaslight flickers strangely. It's a dead end, but not empty. At the far wall sits an old woman on a crate, wrapped in layers of shawls. Before her lies a row of small figurines carved from candle wax. Animals mostly. A rabbit, a cat, a rather lumpy cow. They are surprisingly detailed, if not entirely accurate. When you approach, she doesn't ask for money. She just says, "Pick one, that's yours. You choose the cat." She nods solemnly, wraps it in paper, and hands it over like a sacred relic. "It'll keep your soup from boiling over," she says. You nod as if that makes perfect sense. Tonight, it somehow does. Back on the main road, you spot a boy standing on a crate with a pocket mirror, using it to reflect gaslight onto the street. "Moonlight for hire," he calls. "Romance guaranteed." No one stops, but he doesn't mind. He's got a scarf tied around his neck like a cravat, and the posture of someone who believes, deeply, that everything is better with a little theatre. Farther down, you pass a row of tailor shops, all shuttered tight. But through the slats of one window, you see a figure moving. Curious, you crouch and peer in. Inside, an old tailor sits hunched over a sewing machine, stitching not clothes, but stories. Long strips of muslin bear embroidered phrases in mismatched thread. "Snow in the pipes again. 3 buttons and a heartbeat. I kissed her behind the jam stall." They're draped across mannequins like scarves, hung from ceiling beams tied to doorknobs. The tailor hums softly, almost like a lullaby. It's unclear if these are memories, jokes, or riddles, but they live here, stitched into the air. Outside again, the snow begins to fall. Not thick, just enough to soften the outlines of things. It dusts the window ledges, catches in gaslight, rests gently on the tops of carriages and hats. And the city breathes deeper. You pass a final window. Inside, a woman sits alone, painting ornaments onto oyster shells. Some are cracked. Others still smell faintly of the sea, but each one holds a shape: trees, moons, stars, boots. She strings them together and hangs them like garlands. Then she steps back, admires her work, and smiles. Not because it's perfect, but because it's finished. And that too is something to celebrate in this forgotten Christmas. You've drifted all the way south again toward the riverside, where the air sharpens and carries that unmistakable scent of coal smoke, wet rope, and old fish barrels. The Thames, sluggish and half frozen, murmurs beside you like an old storyteller half asleep. Its banks are dotted with silhouettes, dock workers, night fishermen, a few drunks curled in their coats like birds with their beaks tucked under wing. Just beyond the wharves, a row of shipping warehouses stretches out like the vertebrae of a sleeping giant. Most are dark, but one glows faintly orange through warped glass. You slip through a gap in the timber door. Inside, it's warmer than you'd expect. Dozens of dockhands have gathered in a half circle, sitting on crates, barrels, and heaps of old sailcloth. In the middle stands a man with a mop for a wig, a ladle for a sceptre, and a tablecloth wrapped round his shoulders like a royal cloak. "I present," he announces in his most theatrical voice, "the coronation of King Codswallop I." The room erupts in cheers and boot stomps. A boy, no older than 16, is brought forward to the makeshift throne, a crate labelled "Pickled Gherkins, Inedible." They crown him with a chipped chamber pot, and he accepts the honour with noble solemnity, even as his ears redden. Tonight, this is their holiday feast: a cod's head, a wheel of stolen cheese, 1 bottle of gin, and a half-frozen plum pudding someone swears is only a little bit haunted. You sit quietly and watch the play unfold, 1 part farce, 1 part wishful thinking. Each man takes a turn offering a toast, many of them absurd, to salt that never clumps, to boots that never leak, to the ghost of Christmas not showing up at all this year. The gin makes its way around the circle. No cups, just shared sips and careful passing. When it reaches you, They don't question your presence. They simply nod. Tonight everyone gets a seat. After the toasts, they begin telling stories. Not about kings or generals, but about near drownings. Clever lies told to foremen. The time Jenkins brought a goose aboard a coal barge and swore it could count to 5. One man pulls out a harmonica and begins to play the slow, bending notes of a sailor's song. Another whistles along, a few hum. And then a surprise. The youngest dockhand stands and begins to dance. Awkward at first, then bold. His boots clomp against the wooden floor in rhythm. The men clap, they cheer. They forget for a moment where they are. Even the man playing King Codswallop wipes his eyes and says, "Not bad for a boy with 2 left feet and a brain full of fog." Outside, snow begins to fall again, heavier this time. It presses against the warehouse roof with a muffled hiss. No one moves to leave, not yet. The warmth here isn't from the fire, it's from something much harder to carry. Shared absurdity, bruised pride, and the fierce joy of still being upright when everything else has tried to knock you down. You leave quietly, one last nod to the kingdom of Codswallop, and step back into the hush. Out on the dock, the snow is thicker now, coating the old ropes, the rat-bitten crates, the rusted iron bollards. It deadens the sounds of the river until the water seems to move in silence, like a secret slipping through the city's spine. You walk along the edge of the Thames, boots crunching through ice-crusted slush. Every so often, a distant bell rings out. A ship tethered just beyond the fog, its chain groaning in protest as it sways. But closer by, another sound catches your ear. Tapping. Rhythmic. Wooden. Purposeful. You follow it to a shanty of driftwood and tin wedged between 2 warehouses. A lantern swings above the door, casting golden flickers onto the snow below. Inside, a woman sits at a makeshift workbench surrounded by broken umbrellas. Hundreds of them, some torn, others bent at odd angles, a few with handles made from spoons, chair legs, or even a violin bow. She's repairing them one by one, tightening joints with string, replacing fabric with waxed paper, using candle wax to waterproof the seams. She doesn't look up when you enter. "Storm's coming," she says. "Might as well be ready." You ask who they're for. She shrugs. Anyone who gets caught in it. Behind her, a wall is pinned with chalk marks and names. You recognise a few, people you've passed in earlier corners of this wandering Christmas. Bert, the boy with the mirror, the girl with the one shoe, even King Codswallop. When she finishes one umbrella, she opens it, holds it up to the light to test the spread, and then leans it carefully against the wall. It's not about the umbrella. It's about being the sort of person who repairs things in a broken city. Back outside, you spot an odd sight. A line of coins embedded in the snow, each leading to a different object. A teacup, a shoe, a tin whistle. They form trails like game pieces on a board, or clues in a riddle. You follow one to a man asleep under a blanket of newspapers, the last coin resting beside his outstretched hand. You add one of your own. The snow keeps falling. You walk until your legs ache. Your scarf is stiff with frost, and your fingers are red despite your gloves. And just when you're ready to turn back, you find something unexpected. A bench. Just a bench, but freshly swept. A cushion laid on it, and a tiny card resting on the seat. It reads, "For whoever needs to sit." There's no name, no explanation, just kindness left behind in a world that rarely slows down enough to notice. You sit, you breathe, and as the wind gusts softly off the river, you realize something simple but startling. This is Christmas. Not the Christmas of glitter and hymns and painted windows, but the Christmas of small defiance, of patched boots and borrowed laughter, of pockets turned inside out and still finding something to give. The kind you've walked through, tonight. The kind the world forgets, except for the people who live it, and the people like you who remember. You wake to the smell of smoke and bread. Not burning, not sour, but warm and heavy, the kind that clings to the inside of your nose and whispers, someone is baking something worth waking up for. It's morning, though the sun hasn't quite committed to showing up yet. Just a pale haze leaking over the rooftops, brushing chimney tops in watery gold. London stretches beneath it like a body just stirring, groaning, cracking its joints, yawning through alleyways and coal chutes. You're in Spitalfields now, or near it. You can't quite remember how you got here, only that you drifted east until the city's pulse changed. The streets here are narrower, the buildings older, half-eaten by soot and time, and yet there's colour, painted signs, cracked blue shutters, a yellow door propped open with a boot. That's where the smell is coming from. Inside the tiny shop there's a woman with flour on her elbows and a loaf in each hand, one burnt, one perfect. She's muttering something about ratio and revenge as she shelves them beside a row of oddly shaped rolls. Some are knotted like ropes, others shaped like stars or animals. A boy leans over the counter, biting his lip. She nods, then hands him the burnt one. He beams like he's just won a prize. "You get the good one tomorrow," she says. "Fair's fair." That's the rule here, apparently. First come, last served. Reverse justice, bread style. The woman sees you and jerks her head toward the rack. "Pick one," she says. "No money, just choose." You hesitate, then reach for the star-shaped roll. It's still warm. You thank her, but she's already turned back to the oven, elbows deep in another battle of dough and heat. Outside you wander through the early light, roll in hand, and the city feels different. Not better, just awake. You pass a man painting over graffiti with careful, precise strokes, not to erase it, but to improve it. The original message says, "No hope." He adds a comma and a name, "No Hope." M. Around the corner, a pair of old men are playing cards on a crate. The winner of each hand gets to pick a truth. The war was worth it. The train will come back. The dog really did eat the ham. They argue about it like philosophers, not fools. You smile and keep walking. At the edge of a market square, you find what looks like a forgotten bandstand, but someone's repurposed it into a lost and found. Scarves hang from hooks. Gloves are strung across twine like drying socks. A note is pinned to each, too soft to keep. Not mine, but mine once. Take it if it smells like you. It's not organised, it's not efficient, but it is deeply, messily human. You spot a man tacking up another glove. He turns to you and shrugs. Everything deserves a second chance, right? Even mittens. You nod. You don't take one, but you leave behind the wax cat from earlier, carefully nestled into an empty mug on the shelf, just in case. Someone else needs a soup charm more than you. The market square is waking now, gingerly, like an old man cracking open one eyelid and grumbling at the sky. Stalls begin to creak open, sacks of parsnips dragged into position, turnips stacked like cannonballs, someone muttering about apples gone soft with frost. You drift through it slowly, dodging puddles, past the fishmonger yelling cheerful insults at a boy trying to steal a herring. The boy fails. The fishmonger still gives him half a smoked mackerel. "Nice try, but your timing's off," he says, flicking fish scales off his sleeve. There's a woman selling broken toys, not mending them, just selling them as is. Dolls missing eyes, tin soldiers without rifles, a music box that clicks instead of playing. She's arranged them carefully, each with a handwritten tag. Still brave. Dreams in progress, not finished breaking. You can't help but admire the honesty. Then someone pulls you aside. An elderly man with a face like melted wax and a walking stick that's clearly just a broom handle shaved to size. He says nothing, just points. You follow. Down a narrow passage between buildings, through an archway with ivy like green smoke, past a wall scrawled with chalk figures, little stick people dancing, tumbling, laughing. And there it is, the Christmas tree. No fanfare, no guards, just a tree standing in a small courtyard, forgotten by the city but somehow fully decorated. Not with baubles and candles, but with things. Buttons, keys, bits of cloth, a tiny shoe, a ladle, a corkscrew tied with a red string. A tag hangs from a low branch. Gifts we never gave. Memories we never kept. There's no one else here, but somehow you feel dozens of eyes, watching gently from windows, from stairwells, from behind curtains. You step forward and instinctively remove something from your coat pocket. The oyster shell ornament, painted faintly with a crooked moon. You tie it to a branch, fingers numb from the cold, and step back. The tree doesn't shine, it doesn't sing, it doesn't promise anything, but it holds things. That's enough. And somehow, it feels like everyone in the story you've passed tonight has left something here. The harmonica boy, the potato girl, the dock workers, the umbrella mender, the bread lady, even King Codswallop. They've all dropped tokens onto this tree, quiet acts of memory, tiny anchors against forgetting. You stand there for a long time. Eventually a small voice says, "It's good, isn't it?" You turn. It's the girl with one shoe. She's carrying the potato still, now wrapped in a bit of cloth. "I'm saving it," she whispers, "in case tomorrow's worse." You don't know what to say, so you just nod. She smiles, then points at the ornament you just tied. "That's the moon, right?" You nod again. "I like it," she says. "It looks tired." Then she runs off, barefoot again, laughing like it's the warmest day of the year. You look at the tree one last time. It looks tired too, but it's still standing, just like you. The snow has begun to melt. Not quickly, not all at once, but in that slow, reluctant way that only London snow knows. Melting from the bottom up, leaving slush that creeps into your boots and paints the cobbles with grimy lace. It's nearly the end of the day. You can feel it in your bones, in the way the city exhales. The fog has pulled back just a little, revealing outlines of rooftops like sketches drawn in soot. Chimneys cough out one last plume before going still, and you, still wandering, find yourself somewhere unexpected. A narrow garden behind a tenement block. You wouldn't have noticed it, if not for the sound of a broom sweeping steadily across stone. Back and forth, back and forth. Not frantic, not angry, just steady. An old woman is clearing snow from a path that leads to nowhere, literally. It ends at a brick wall. You watch her a moment before asking the obvious. She pauses, leans on her broom and says, "Well, if someone's going to walk in circles, they may as well not trip doing it." Then she smiles. Her name is Mrs. Plim. She tells you she's lived here 62 years. She once worked in a hat factory. She once danced with a man who never wrote her back. She once tried to sell jam at a street fair and got arrested by mistake for participating in an illegal protest. It was the sign, she says, said more fruit for the people. Apparently that was considered seditious in 1897. She laughs, then offers you a biscuit from a tin shaped like a lion. It tastes like chalk, sugar and defiance. Then she shows you her winter tree. Not outside, not decorated, just a little fir branch nailed to her wall inside. On it hangs every Christmas card she's ever received, even the ones that weren't really meant for her. Ones she found on the street, or pulled from bins, or borrowed from people who didn't want them. "I like the ones that say, 'to someone special,'" she says, tapping one with a mittened finger. "You'd be amazed how many people throw those out." She gestures for you to sit. There's only one chair, so she sits on an upturned bucket, and she tells you stories. Not about herself this time, but about people she's known. a man who built tiny ships inside light bulbs, a girl who grew teeth in the wrong places, a parrot that swore in 5 languages and prayed in Latin, a chimney sweep who sang opera on rooftops and once set fire to a bishop's laundry by accident. None of them are alive now, but you can tell they are still very much with her, and somehow, now, with you. She pauses after one story and says, "Everyone thinks memory's like a photo, but it's not. It's like steam. It touches everything, and then it's gone, unless you breathe it in." You sit there until the biscuit tin is empty and her broom leans quietly against the door. Then she says, "Off you go. I think the night's got one last thing to show you." So you leave, the taste of chalky sugar still on your tongue, and step back into the soft melting night. The city is quieter now, not asleep. London never truly sleeps, but quieter in the way that matters. Footsteps are slower, voices lower. Even the horses pulling late carts seem to clip-clop with more care, as if they too are trying not to wake something fragile. You walk, past windows glowing orange with hearthlight, past boots drying on stoops, their leather steaming, past doors cracked open just wide enough for a cat to slip through, or a song to spill out. Faint strains of violin maybe, or a broken music box, or someone humming to themselves while mending a coat. You don't follow any of them. Instead, your feet lead you somewhere unexpected. One final stop. The old iron gate swings open without resistance and you step into a garden you swear wasn't here before. It's circular, quiet, empty, except for a bench and a tree stump carved into the shape of a clock face, with no hands. You sit, and for a moment, nothing happens. But then, footsteps, familiar ones, a boy with a cracked mirror tucked under his arm, the girl with one shoe and her wrapped potato, the fishmonger's helper, now gnawing on the last bite of smoked mackerel, King Codswallop in his paper crown, the umbrella mender, the bread lady, Mrs. Plim with her biscuit tin, all of them. They sit beside you, or near you, or across from you. No one says a word. But one by one, they begin placing things on the stump. A button, a cork, a harmonica reed, a wool scrap shaped like a star, the wax cat, and finally, the oyster shell moon. You add nothing. You've already given yours. Instead, you just watch as the clock stump begins to glow faintly, not with magic, not with fire, but with something warmer and older. Memory, shared, tangible, real. Then the tree above it drops a single leaf, just one, paper thin, etched with veins like handwriting. It lands in your lap. You pick it up. On it, scrawled in ink that shimmers faintly. Remember this, that's all. You look up, and they're gone, every one of them. But the garden's still here, and the bench, and the tree stump, and the leaf. So maybe that's the point. Maybe this was the forgotten Christmas. Not because it was unimportant or quiet or plain, but because it wasn't remembered enough. Because its gifts weren't wrapped. Because its kindnesses were quiet. Because its heroes were ordinary. Because its magic was slow. But not anymore. Now you remember, and you carry it with you, in the soles of your boots, in the weight of your coat, in the steam of a shared cup of tea, in the sound of a match striking in the dark. You stand. The snow starts again, soft, new, like the city is pressing reset, and somewhere, in a room you'll never see, someone's writing your name on a card that says, "To someone special." They won't throw it out, they'll keep it, just in case you forget, because the truth is, you never really walk through a story like this, alone. And now that our strange little journey is at its end, it's time to rest, friend. You've walked a long way tonight, through alleys and markets, over frostbitten bridges, down stairwells, and into borrowed memories. You've met people who don't usually make it into the history books, and yet somehow they're the ones holding everything together, with buttons, with bread, with umbrellas and oyster shells. You've seen how a Christmas can exist without tinsel or trumpets, how it can survive in scraps and laughter and second-hand biscuits. You've seen that memory isn't always about the grand and the gold. It can live in broken dolls, chalky footprints, and a tree that nobody notices unless they need it. And now it's okay to let the world fade. Let the fog roll in. Let the snow muffle your thoughts. Let the clock stop ticking for a little while. You're safe here. You're part of this strange, forgotten story now, and it remembers you, even if you forget it for a time. So close your eyes, breathe in deep, feel the city settle, the river slow, the lanterns flicker just a little dimmer. And as you drift off, know this: somewhere, someone saved a seat for you on a bench you'll find again. Maybe not tomorrow, but when you need it most,